and welcome, everybody, to this episode 26 of the Lookout Sir 40K podcast, a Warhammer 40,000 podcast made, produced, developed, and delivered by an assortment of friends, the names of which are as follows. Myself, Dan, the man talking at the beginning, and to be fair, most of the way through. My good buddy Phil. How you doing, Phil?
Hello, I'm good, thank you.
Wonderful stuff. We've got Joe. How's it been, Joe?
Oh, it's all good.
And also, good old Rich. How you doing, Rich?
Alright, happy to be here.
Absolutely. Happy to have you, mate. What a wonderful occasion. So, how's things going? I mean, you know, Joe, have you been doing much in the way of wonderful things within the Warhammer 40,000 hobby?
Well, me and you went to a tournament.
We did.
Okay.
That's going to be somewhat of a recurring theme throughout this episode. I suppose we should do like a Sesame Street style. Yeah. This episode is brought to you by tournaments.
Yeah, it's a weird situation where we talk about this in the past and played it in the past, but now we're talking about it in the future before those things happened. It's kind of like the whole Terminator series.
It's true.
Is it like that episode of Red Dwarf where it's like, it hasn't happened, but it hasn't happened yet?
Yeah, essentially that. So
it's the alternative 1985.
Yeah, and for people that have asked, I have actually finished my GT tournament army. That's fully painted. I've got some pictures up on Instagram, and I've already and I've already moved on to the next project. I'm just cranking it out, basically. Cranking away.
So how did you do at this tournament, Joe? What was the performance?
It was really good. I posted my first 3 straight wins in a one-day event in about 2 years.
You also got Best Painted award, didn't you?
I did. I actually won that for once because I always get nominated, but I never win. So, it was a good feeling.
I mean, not nearly as prestigious as when Phil won it at GT Heat 1 back in 2017, but pretty close, right? I mean, you know, it's a start.
Yeah, it's a start. It's a step in the right direction.
I mean, what's your opinion on that, Phil? Is that nearly as good an accomplishment as what obviously you achieved, or do you just think that, you know, it's just a little event that took place on a farm and is not worthy of any real praise?
I'm not going to comment.
Oh, he does! Look at that! Did you hear that, Joe?
No, I think your condescending tone, not said it all, but you know, you're sort of trying to set me up. I can't say that about Joe, can I?
No, it's true. It's true. I've been very rude, Joe. Obviously, my army would never ever even get nominated, let alone, you know, win. Yeah. So, I mean, credit where credit's due, mate. You painted a beautiful army, and you deserved the prize.
Yeah, I went for something different. I cheated terribly in terms of playing my army because everyone walks up to me and they're like, "Oh, how did you do the checkers, the diamonds on your Harlequins? That must have been taking you ages to paint." And no, it took me ages to individually put diamond transfers on them. So I went through the Harlequin transfer sheet, the Knight transfer sheets, the Space Wolf transfer sheets, and even some Mechanicum transfer sheets have diamonds on. And I cut them all out individually and placed them on.
I mean, that sounds more of a pain in the arse than just painting them on.
It's a lesson in patience, I'll tell you, because you've got to place them like the same distance apart every single time, like from each other. And then what I discovered the first time I did it, I put so much water on, I got distracted and came back, and they slipped round the nose of the bike. So I had to start all over again.
That must have been quite a soul-destroying moment for you.
It was, and I do a lot of my painting in my the hour before work. I kind of sit at my desk, I do some painting, and then I do some at lunch. So if that happened like it did at the end of my lunch break, I have to wait like 4.5, 5 hours until I can go back and fix it.
Wonderful stuff.
So that was horrible.
So I've not seen it up close, but I think it's going to look fantastic because the lines are going to be so straight because you've used the transfers.
Yeah, that's the thing I kind of wanted to do, because having done Harlequins before, I could never get those perfect crisp lines. that you can only really get if you use an airbrush and a stencil. So I kind of found a way around that, and our good friend Sean showed me how to apply transfers nicely so you lose that kind of like shadowing on the outside, from where it goes from the coloured bit of the transfer to the clear bit of the transfer, and then the model itself, you kind of get this weird ghosting effect. So he showed me how to, like, through using a million different varnishes, you can basically make it look like the transfer itself is painted on.
What are we to do now, Rich, to notice what is a Joe painted army? I mean, you know, the poorly applied transfers was a signature of the Joe army before.
But did he know that we talked about that though?
Probably not.
I mean, he does now.
He does now, but that's because he's transcended. You see, he's better now. I mean, you know, he no longer needs to concern himself with those former issues.
Yeah. Now I've got to figure out how to paint gold without an airbrush, and it's horribly tedious.
That is generally the issue. So you came second overall at this tournament after posting 3 wins. Did you confirm that? Did you say that?
Yeah.
Because who won, Joe, at this tournament of yours, you know, where you came second? Who came first? I bet he was a...
No one's interested in who came first.
Yeah, I bet he was a proper brilliant geezer. Probably one of the best gamers of all time, I imagine.
Some dirty hick he was.
I don't understand what you're talking about, Joe. I heard on the grapevine that he was a super cool geezer.
Yeah, he's all right.
He's all right. He'll do.
Some people say he talks too much, but
I heard he was a real articulate fella.
There you go. That's the spirit. It was me, wasn't it, Joe? I beat you.
Yeah. Well, you didn't actually get to play each other.
No, it's true. Although I did request a grudge match against you, but I was told that I was too many points ahead and that it wouldn't be fair on Joe to have to play against someone as good as me when he's clearly not quite at that level.
As we discovered at the end of the event, you were only 5 points ahead of me.
Ah, yes, but as those who understand, you know, Formula One racing or similar kind of racing sports, those 5 points, you know, that's a lifetime in tournament gaming.
Yeah. I think what didn't help was that the ETC kind of format of Maelstrom cards as well as Eternal War. So in my first game against my first opponent, I had 2 turns where I scored nothing because I just had terrible cards.
Yeah, that is pretty unfortunate. Because that was the one that was, you scored 4 points at the end, 3 points per objective at the end, and then throughout it was Maelstrom, wasn't it?
Whereas the other 2 missions were a cumulative objective holding as well. So those ones I was posting like scores continuously, whereas the first one you had to rely on cards until turn 5, turn 6. So it was a bit of a mare, but we got through it.
Exactly. But well done, Joe, mate. I'm super happy for you. 3 consecutive wins is an amazing result at a tournament.
Yeah, and I feel confident, strong going on into our tournament coming up this weekend.
Today, in fact, happening right now.
Yeah, another one of those terminal moments of we're talking about it in the future, about the future, but it's happening in the now.
Yes.
Oh, God. Time is confusing.
Certainly when you're doing this weird, you know, fortnightly format of a podcast. But yeah, you know, myself, you, Rich, maybe Phil. Phil is on the fence. I mean, Phil, are you going to come?
Well, the issue is, even if I was to come, I'm busy on the Friday, and I'd probably have to stay at yours if we're going to go, just because of the logistics of getting down there.
So what you're saying is you can still come, you can still make it then?
No, because I'm busy on the Friday.
But I don't understand. It's on a Saturday, Phil. This is so confusing.
It's right. We'll figure this out afterwards.
Exactly.
I don't think Phil should go because there'll be less room in the car.
Well, it's true. There will definitely become more of a squeeze at that point, you know. I reckon you should wake up at 5 in the morning, Phil, get on a train, come to my place. It'll be fine. We'll have a great time.
Yay.
There you go. That's the voice of enthusiasm. I mean, Phil, what have you been up to lately, buddy? Because I noticed that you've been doing lots and lots of posting of lots of beautifully painted things that you're working on at the minute. You've moved from construction mode to paint mode.
I have. I've been painting on my Inquisitor predominantly, and for the last, 4 or 5 days, I've been painting just the skin tone and ballsing it up and constantly repainting it. So I finally cracked it today with some help from the old Forge World painter friend, Giuseppe. He gave me a bit of a technique which helped loads. So I'm finally happy with how I've been painting the skin on the model. So I can now just proceed to finishing it off and then cracking on to the rest of the models because I've got quite a bit to paint.
Does all those layers of paint now just make it look like she's got way too much makeup on?
No, I mean, that would actually be quite a cool effect. I think it's probably hidden. It's probably smoothed out some of the detail, but I don't, paint's pretty thin in general, so I don't think it's too much of a problem in terms of thickening the model up too much.
There you go. Well, exciting. And, on the topic of you posting pictures on social media, Rich has also been doing lots of fun stuff on our social media, which is interesting because we're going to actually, for the first time ever, have something resembling a community segment within the show where we've asked the opinions of you, the audience, and bizarrely, because we're, being slightly more proactive, some people have actually responded. So we're going to deal with that. But I mean, Rich, how are you finding, getting out there amongst the incredible fan base that is Lookout Sir 40K?
It was really good. It was really exciting. We actually got way more respondents than I thought we would because it was the first time doing it. Got don't have a huge following, but very definitely from there seem very dedicated and active as well, which is really cool. So thank you to everyone who did respond, give us a comment. We tried to include as many of those as we can in the actual podcast itself. And we always try to share those questions that people have asked, and if there's something witty or meme related we can share on Instagram, we'll do that as well. On that topic, we are a small group. We're doing this for fun, so I'm focusing on Instagram for engaging with you guys and girls, obviously. The fact that you listeners, loyal listeners. Yeah, so the nicest and the easiest way to kind of interact with people in fun ways is on Instagram. So that's where we're going to be doing a bit more interacting with you guys. So if you don't usually follow us on Instagram already, please do, because that's where you'll be able to ask us questions and see more of our little content we'll be putting out more regularly.
There you go. Exciting. I mean, it's very nice that obviously you called out guys and girls. I can tell you from the YouTube analytics, you probably don't need to worry too much about calling out the ladies, but at the same time,
I'm used to saying guys, and I just mean anyone who I'm speaking to. But just to be clear, whether you're a guy or a girl or in between, or a mineral or a vegetable or a sandwich, if you're a loyal subscriber, we're happy to have you.
Absolutely, and even if you're not, we're happier still. Although that doesn't make sense.
I mean, if you're a less loyal subscriber, obviously, we're still happy to have you be part of the team.
Exactly. It's all pretty lovely. And on the topic of our Instagram, it's simple enough. Just look for Lookout Sir 40K, or just Lookout Sir, in fact, on Instagram, and hopefully you'll find us there.
But if you follow Lookout Sir 40K and just check out the stories, in fact, I might do a story specific to all of you guys so that everyone can easily see, get the links to follow you guys separately as well. So we'll figure out something to make it a very slick Instagram page.
Yeah, fundamentally, if you'd like to engage with that, please do. And that's enough of us kind of trying to put that across. So let's be talking about what we're going to be talking about. So first and foremost, we will be talking to Adam of 40k BRAWL fame. So Adam is quite an active tournament organiser here within the south of England. And he is coming on the podcast primarily to talk about the BEACHHEAD BRAWL event, which is a 40k GT event happening in, I believe, March 2020. It was March 2020, right?
Sometime around then. We'll find out in a few minutes.
Exactly. Listen to the actual segment and you'll know for sure. So he's going to be talking to us about that, as well as ultimately how they're approaching it. The goal is for this to be a really big GT event in the south of England. So it's going to be taking place in Bournemouth, and he is aiming to get 200 gamers along, which is a pretty incredible goal, and hopefully something that he'll be able to achieve. I know I've already bought my ticket, and I know that Joe is planning on doing the same very soon.
Yep, I am. So I'll hopefully be going.
And then hopefully Rich and maybe even Phil will be persuaded to join us at the time. But then, you may have heard earlier, complicated to get that far south for some. But let's see what occurs. But so Adam's there talking to us about that. Then afterwards, we're also going to have a little bit of a chat around tournament etiquette, which is a bit of an interesting topic because all too often we are going to events and encountering different people, and it's interesting how they react, respond, and engage with tournament gaming. And ultimately, we wanted to briefly talk about how we approach a tournament, so how we actually think about these kind of events, these kind of gaming occasions, but then also how we like to conduct ourselves within. So there's a few little horror stories of funny little instances that have occurred in the past, but also a lot of interesting information about how we try and approach these things, which hopefully has become more apparent as you've listened to our ongoing talks around grand tournament list ideas and what we do when it comes to constructing these lists and so on. Then we're going to actually have Richie join us to talk about his Grand Tournament Heat 2 list. So obviously Richie's here right now, but he will also be with us later telling us about what he's going to be doing with that. So that's going to be really exciting to see how that all comes together. And then finally is our community question segment, where this week we are going to respond to the question of favourite units that we really, really like, but ultimately can rarely to never use because we think they're a bit rubbish. But actually, it's more of kind of like a guilty pleasure thing, if you will. It's one of those sort of things of units that we wish were better or may even still try to use every now and again, despite the fact that we know they're a little bit rubbish. And that's it. No quiz this time. No news this time because, bar the fact that the Primaris Lieutenant has been, showing off blurry photos of new Space Marines, not a great deal has happened, I suppose. I mean, there was that, the new Phobos armour for the Lieutenant, and then also they did another Sisters of Battle bulletin where they showed off the, what are they called? What are those Sisters of Battle called when they're, draped in robes and run around with chainswords?
The Repenter?
That sounds about right, the Repenters, which again look pretty incredible, like everything else that's coming out from Sisters of Battle. I'm sure there's someone out there who was frustrated that they weren't quite revealing enough. They've gone for more of a kind of sack type design on them now, haven't they?
Well, I think they look absolutely stunning. I personally love the futuristic trainers they're wearing. I kind of want to do them like wearing like Nike Airs or something.
I didn't realise they were wearing futuristic trailers. Is that trailers? I mean, that would be an incredible thing. But yeah, trainers. Is that an actual thing?
That is a thing.
Really? I'm now desperately loading up the page to see how that actually looks.
On a related topic, I bought a pair of Nikes during this conversation.
During this conversation?
Well, during this podcast, rather.
They do a lot of running around, don't they? So they can't wear like boots and stuff.
Yeah, God, no, I didn't even think to notice.
I think the original models had something similar, but maybe not quite as trainer looking. But they obviously did have footwear.
It's also really cool that they've added in those, those little plugs and things into them as well. I guess for obviously their suits of power armor and so on. So it's really interesting that they've added those elements to the design as well, which is super cool.
Yeah, it's just a nice little detail to show that like these were power armor wearing people, so those kind of things are still going to be prevalent, because I know in the metals they didn't have that little detail. It's quite nice that they've gone that a little bit further in the storytelling process of the model.
No, it looks really, really cool, man. Yeah, with that being said, we're going to move on to the first of our segments, which, as I said earlier, is us talking to Adam about all the different things he's up to. And, thanks very much, as always, for checking out the Lookout Sir 40K podcast. We hope you enjoy it. Let us know what you think, all the usual stuff, like and subscribe, and all that other fun stuff. We hope you enjoy. Thanks very much. Woo! Welcome back, everybody. this segment of the podcast, maybe one or two, in honesty, we haven't really decided at this point, but it's going to depend massively on how the opening conversation goes, and then we'll kind of take it from there. So the intent of this section is to talk to our lovely guest, Mr. Adam. How are you, sir? How's life?
Oh, I'm not too bad. Not too bad. Hello again.
Welcome back to the Lookout Sir 40K podcast. You're home away from home, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah, why not?
Why not?
I think maybe after 3, I reckon that might be the case. Just 2.
Is that what you're angling for? You want to come on a third time down the road somewhere?
Do I get like a hat-trick football if I come on 3 times? Obviously, probably not. That would make sense. That's a Soccer AM reference, so that's probably not going to get that.
No, I was going to say, I mean, you know, I kind of understand the context of a hat-trick, but, you know, I wouldn't even begin to understand what the difference between one of those as a football and or not would be.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah.
What's the general kind of, like, thing that a hat-trick football has over and above a regular football?
Oh, it's just basically when you go on Soccer AM 3 times, they give you a hat-trick football.
Oh.
You could get a T-shirt.
Yeah, I imagine you make me pay for that, though. And
No, we'll freely give you a T-shirt if you promise to shill for us.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll talk after the show.
Yeah, alright, fantastic. So should you see Adam in a Lookout Sir 40K T-shirt, don't trust him. He's telling nothing but lies. Although, to be fair, a lot of the time that's also the case anyway. But Adam, you're here not to necessarily peddle lies, but to peddle healthy truths. Also, as well, I should probably say, Joe's here. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
And Phil's here as well. Hello, Phil.
Hello.
There you go. Today is reportedly the hottest day in all of English history.
Ah, it's not though, is it? We missed out.
Did we?
Yeah, it didn't make it, did it? We only got to like 38.1.
Oh! We can't
sorry,
even
mate.
get that right anymore. We're so
You've lied to
silly.
everyone about that. I might be wrong. I might be mistaken.
Is that Boris's fault?
Everything's Boris's fault.
That seems to be the mantra right now.
We can't talk about that though because you might offend somebody. Might get offended because somebody might be a Boris fan.
Well, I'm not neither saying that I am in favour or against Boris. I'm simply asking if it's his fault.
Ah, all right, fair enough.
There you go.
Well, probably not in reality.
Oh, exactly. In all honesty, definitely not his fault. So there you go, Boris. You got that win. Also, anyway, let's not get into it. Let's leave it be. So anyway, Adam has joined us because he's got a tournament that he wants to talk about, and that we all believe wholeheartedly that you should go along and, you know, get involved with, because by crikey, it's only, what are they actually calling it now, Adam? Is it the Bournemouth Grand Tournament?
It is currently called the Bournemouth Grand Tournament, but the intention is to call it the BEACHHEAD BRAWL. So anyway, I'll just do a quick rundown of the event. So BEACHHEAD is already an existing sort of tabletop wargaming show. In the past, it's been sort of quite heavily geared towards like historical stuff. You know, the real grown-up sort of part of the hobby that we all take part in. But he sold out and he succumbed to us Games Workshoppers under a lot of pressure by myself, really, because I felt that the south of England really needed to get itself on the map in terms of a big, you know, GT or major 40k event, because all the big ones outside of Games Workshop are up north. I mean, you could argue the Games Workshop's up north. Not you, is that? I mean, it's above Watford. That's up north.
Well, indeed. I think that's more the Midlands by the official kind of rules.
Well, the official, yeah, but anything above Watford's north. So
Well, there's also the LGT, isn't there? That's the big one, isn't it?
it is the big one, and the reality is probably not quite going to manage to reach those numbers. But there are quite a few sort of 100-ish sort of man events up north, and very few of them down south.
No, fair enough.
To put something on for the poor people in the south. I thought this was a good opportunity, so we've hijacked that event, made it an extra day, and we've managed to secure the BIC in Bournemouth, which is a pretty decent venue by all accounts.
Where's that? Sorry, the PIC.
The BIC.
Oh, the BIC. Sorry, there you go.
The BIC.
The Bournemouth International Centre.
Ah, there we go. That makes more sense.
Yeah. Have you ever been to Bournemouth? It's quite
I have
large.
been, yeah, but I didn't know that there was a place called the BIC. I would have assumed that it was some kind of, Hall of Fame for razors or something. or pens even.
Biros.
Yeah, biros.
Yeah.
Do they
Just a
do
giant
big mates razors as well as pens, or is that just me getting confused between brands?
No, they
No,
do
cost
them, and they're the worst in the world.
There you go.
Everyone's just using a bit of granite.
Joe, you've ruined that sponsorship endorsement there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, so anyway, that's where it's going to be. It's all done. It's launched now. It is all over the Facebook. I spent a good sort of 3 hours putting it in the direction of anybody who I thought might be interested last night, and sharing it on all the various competitive 40k and tournament pages. So if your listeners are on Facebook, they can find it in those relevant things, or you can search for BEACHHEAD, BEACHHEAD 2020 on Facebook, and you'll find the event. But it's going to be a 6-round event, 2,000 points ITC, because that's where competitive 40k seems to be going. And looking forward to it.
Makes an awful lot of sense. The 2,000 point threshold, and how many hours per round is it?
3 of your finest hours.
3 of my finest hours. There you go. That's a pretty good, again, that all seems in line. Will you be using chess clocks or anything of that nature, or are you still uncertain on that front?
Yeah, so obviously this is happening in February, so the rules pack is out, so the missions are available for everyone to view, and they can see the timings, although I need to adjust them. Somebody's very kindly pointed out I made a slight error, and a couple of the rounds are 2 at 3.5 hours at the moment, I think. But they won't be. So with chess clocks, my gut feeling is at the moment I'm going to probably say if one player wants to use them, you use them, because if I personally am not a big fan of slow play. 3 hours is absolutely plenty to get a game in. Like, if you can't finish a game in 40k in 3 hours, then there's something not quite right. So I think if somebody wants to use a chess clock, I'll let them, I think.
Fair enough. But there is no technical official ruling on that at this stage.
At this stage, what we'll probably do is use the ITC code of conduct for the event, which I think is, if one person wants to use a chess clock's used.
Will that also extend to their yellow card, red card system, or is that too much of a headache for you at this time?
At the moment, I don't know for sure. I think it goes. Is it 3 strikes and you're out with the ITC?
Yeah.
I believe that's the case, because
okay.
and it defines what a strike is. It's a very comprehensive document, and I haven't had chance to read it all, and I haven't ever yet in my years of TOing, I've not yet had a situation where it's quite been that drastic. Obviously, I've only, at this stage, I think the biggest event I've run up to is 36, I think. So, this is obviously a bit bigger. So we will inevitably have to put something like that in place for it, because with more people comes the higher possibility somebody will misbehave.
Well, indeed. And obviously, you say that you've only run a tournament of up to 36 people before. What are you doing yourself to try and kind of gear up for the bigger tournament? I mean, what's the cap going to be on this particular event? Is there one, or how far can you go with it?
So initially, we're saying 200, which I think is realistic. I think there's definitely 200 people in the UK that will want to get to a big event like this. The reason I think it'll attract a lot of people is because more and more people are trying to get up the ITC rankings. I think we even spoke not that long ago, and you said you'd noticed suddenly, or somebody had told you that you were appearing on the rankings, and I think everyone there's a sort of fundamental human want to be on a ranking and climb up it. So, as that grows, and you can see the UK by itself as well, which helps. As that grows, people, I think, will just gravitate towards it and want to get that. And because it's such a large event, it will be, I believe, the second largest ITC event in the UK. I might be wrong. There might be some ones that are close, but obviously after the LGT, it will be worth a lot of points.
So it's quite likely, because this is pretty much towards the close of the season, right? Because the season resets at LVO or just before LVO, right?
This is the LVO is the finale. So this, in theory, will kick the season off.
Oh, okay. So this is the first Well,
if you want to
potentially one of the first ones of the season, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And obviously it's over. I think for a major, I think it's only 120. So we should, barring a catastrophe, get to that number. I think. Amazing. So it'll be worth the highest number of points. So and obviously, apart from the points, it's a good chance to meet a lot of people. I've already spoken to a lot of the sort of the guys that are considered some of the best players in the UK, and they've already stated their intent to come. In fact, some of them have even already bought tickets. So, it's very early days. It's all only been out at the time of recording, only been out for 2 days, and we're getting some positive vibes for it already. I think there's big appetite for something like this in the area we're in. So.
I totally agree. And are you recruiting or have you got a team of guys that are going to be helping you out from a TO perspective, or how's that going to work?
Yeah, so I am in the sort of recruiting at the moment, I guess, really, or will start recruiting. I've already got a couple of guys that are going to help, but we'll be adding to that as time goes on, because I think we probably need about 5 guys for the 40k. But as well as 40k, I should also mention I wouldn't be doing the event any favours if I didn't mention that they're also running an Age of Sigmar event for those who are inclined to play Age of Sigmar. There is also going to be, I'm pretty sure there's X-Wing, Blood Bowl, Conflict 47 if you like your weird alternative World War II. There's some other stuff as well. I think they're getting Night Vault involved as well, I believe, so there'll be that on the cards. It's a very big venue. There's a lot of space. So I think it basically, for anyone who's been to, if anyone went to the LGT last year, there'll be that sort of number of events all on one floor though. So
with mentioning the infamous LGT, will you have scenery on your table?
Yeah, so that's something that's all being sort of finalised at the moment. I can't talk too much about it, but what I can say is there will be adequate terrain and your standard sort of gaming mats that you would be well used to on all the tables. And it will be done right. But yeah, we've got 6 months to prep it. The terrain's actually work's already started on that. So
yeah,
there'll be announcements on the event page with the update of what's going on with the terrain, as and when they arrive. But it'll all be well in advance. But I can assure everybody that's attending or wants to attend that it will be done properly.
Well, there you go. With the best of intentions at this early stage, right?
Yeah, but I can confidently say, knowing what I know, that there's like a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C.
Cool.
And they're all very valid, I can assure you.
I suppose that's one of the bizarre after effects of the infamous London Grand Tournament, because obviously now there is greater scrutiny in the initial instances on people beginning and implementing these types of events, so people are a little bit more understandably apprehensive in the initial instances. And I suppose as well that means for you kind of need to do more to kind of put people's minds at rest and so on. Are you going to be doing a lot of social media stuff around this? Are you going to be trying to kind of put yourself out there a bit more and kind of talk to a variety of different people like ourselves doing all this YouTubery podcasty nonsense, or what's the thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, yes, you guys are the first. I mean, if the opportunity arises to get out there and speak to others in the open forum and talk to the guys that are attending, then yes, absolutely. I've already spoken to, not in such a public, on a podcast or anything like that, but spoken to the sort of the hobby celebrities, I guess, I think you might call them.
Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to put it out there, because obviously they're massive influences, just like yourselves. You have a very high number of listeners, so it's good to just get the word out there. And as long as we sell the number of tickets, there's definitely not an issue with getting the terrain. But it all comes down to money at the end of the day. That's what makes the world work. But most of the terrain and mats is already sorted anyway, so it's it's not too much of that's not really a big concern at the moment.
No, exciting.
The concern's just getting it out there and getting people hyped and making sure we've got the numbers. Because if we're going to track the numbers, it makes it all a bigger spectacle and more of a thing. I know you like that phrase, Dan. So.
Are you going to be doing any kind of like painting competitions or things like that alongside it, or is it just strictly tournament?
I think that there will definitely be. There'll either be painting competitions within each tournament, so for the various platform like game systems that are being run, or there'll be an overall painting competition. Entoyment have on their staff a couple of at least one Golden Demon winning painter who judges the painting competitions for the tournaments that are run there. So I'm sure he'll be involved.
Amazing.
And and I believe I don't know if I can say, but I'll mention the fact that Siege Studios are quite probably coming down as well. So there'll be plenty of good, good painters about. So I'm sure there'll be something, but it seems inevitable that something like that will happen.
Good stuff. Means Phil's got a chance to win something if he comes along, right, Phil?
Yeah.
Was this something that would interest you, Phil? Are you going to join us in Bournemouth?
Possibly. It's something I'd have to think about because I've got quite a bit on my plate. In terms of tournaments this year, next year, don't know.
Phil, what you're supposed to do...
This is February 2020, mate. It's 6 months away.
I was going to say, Phil, what you're supposed to do... Come on, Phil, Corporate Shield. Say absolutely, of course, I can't wait.
I'm more encouraged by the fact that if you were to do painting competitions or the other game systems, even something like Blood Bowl, I'd be quite tempted to go down and do. Not to say I don't mind doing 40k, but I think the sort of 40k ITC scene probably isn't best suited for me. But who knows? Who knows by then on what armies I will have.
Well, that backfired on me. I thought Phil would just, yeah, absolutely, can't wait.
Well, here's the great thing about the show, though. It is first and foremost, well, I would say it was first and foremost a hobby show. So it's going to have traders, painters, events on. Like there'll be some, like as I said, Siege are going to be down there doing like a teaching class type thing, I believe. So there's going to be lots on. There'll be lots of stalls and traders selling their, various hobby related stuff. So there's all of that, and then alongside of that, there is obviously all the tournaments that are going to be running on. So there will be plenty to do. I believe last year there were 4,000 or 5,000 people there, and there weren't really many tournaments last year. It was much smaller in terms of like gaming. It's only really this year that it's ramping up.
And what's
Very cool.
In terms of like obviously with all those sort of people and so on, what other kind of facilities have they got within that venue for players and so on? Is there going to be? I mean, I assume there's like bars in there and all the other bits and pieces, all the normal kind of stuff you'd expect in an event, right?
Yeah, so the BIC's quite well situated. It is within the BIC. There's a food hall and like a bar and what have you, etc. It's a big concert venue. It's massive, but it is fairly central within Bournemouth. So, like, you've literally got a 2-minute walk, and you've got all of like the various restaurants you might want to go to, like I don't know, Five Guys, Nando's, whatever. It's all very close.
Amazing. And every table will have chairs.
Every table might have chairs. I don't know that. I haven't actually asked a question about chairs.
There you go. There you go. Get on the chairs question, mate. You got to have chairs. That's always the oversight, isn't it? That was one of the other things of the LGT. It was just a bunch of people stood up in close proximity to each other all the time. Need a chair. You got to get the chair.
I had chairs at the LGT.
They're not so important day one, but day two, like game 5, that's when you're back getting a bit still.
I think we've accounted for 5 foot between the tables. Does that sound right? 5 or 6 foot between. There's definitely a fair. Like it's going to be fairly spacious. I don't think the chair issue. I mean, I don't know the answer fully, but I'm pretty sure there will be chairs. I've been very surprised.
Oh, there we go. Well, just put it on your radar, mate. Have the question.
That's good. Yeah.
Although, if you're, someone who desperately needs a chair, maybe get one of those nice little campy seats and bring it along, just in case. Or maybe Adam will address it at some point.
I'll put a notice up if there will be no chairs. I'm pretty sure you can safe bet there's chairs.
I think so. That sounds really exciting, though, man. And it's cool that you're expanding, because obviously you've also got one of your 40k Brawl events going on in a few weeks' time to this recording, although I think when we go out... actually, no, it will be this weekend when this one's happening, so there's very little opportunity to plug that here. But that is happening right now.
Well, the tickets will still be available, yeah. So it's a up to 36-man event, one day in Poole on the 3rd of August.
Yeah, no, today, when this goes out, will be the 3rd of August, so you'd have to have listened to us as soon as it goes live at 8 a.m. in the UK, and then madly decide...
I'll tell you what, I really fancy driving the Poole and playing 40k.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, to be fair, if you listen to this and you fancy just turning up and seeing what, Adam looks like and myself and Joe look like for reals, come by and say hello. We won't be in any way concerned.
If that happens...
Could you imagine if someone actually comes and does it and goes like, "Hey man, I love you"? Be like, cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of nice. Not that I discourage or don't want to be showered in praise. I think ultimately
that's what you live for.
Well, look, I mean, I do a podcast on the internet, right? I've got to have some sort of screw loose with me somewhere. I mean, Joe, what's your motivation for all this?
I want to live like Caesar eventually.
Which Caesar?
The one that didn't get stabbed by all of his so-called friends.
Oh, I see.
The salad.
I was going to say, I so thought he was going to respond with salad. But there you go.
Yeah.
Or the small white dog.
Was there a small white dog called Caesar?
Yeah, the Caesar dog food people.
Oh, yeah, the Caesar dog food people.
Random.
You don't know it.
No, I do, I remember it now, although I feel like it was Felix, wasn't it? Oh, no, that's the cat variant, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, we digress. This is the sort of reason why people complain about us on YouTube, that we go off topic too much.
Rambling.
It is quite rambly at the best of times, unfortunately. So, yeah, so this is going to be happening in February of 2020. It is the kickoff, officially, of the 2020 ITC, right, Ad?
Yeah, it might be. It depends when they actually close it. It should be. The final is the LVO, which is 2 weeks prior.
Normally they have the LVO, which is a 2-day event, and then the people who get knocked out day one, there's normally another tournament on the Sunday, which is like officially the first tournament of the season.
Well, there you go. This will be one of the big ones to kick off the UK. It will certainly be the big kick-off to the UK one. See.
Boom. There you go. That's an incredible strategy for those players who really want to kind of jumpstart and have their own little extra tournament that doesn't involve the best players, because obviously all the best ones qualify and go into the actual finals, and then it's like, ooh, quickly, we got to try and get ahead. It's quite incredible.
Well, I mean, there are more than 8 very good players in the USA. I mean, there are more than 8 very good players here. So,
well, that is very true. That is very true. I suppose I'm doing everyone in that situation a bit of a disservice. I apologise, everybody. Don't hate me.
Putting everyone out down.
I know. I'm just so flipping arrogant. It's unbelievable. Well, there you go, mate. Well, I think that was pretty comprehensive. All of the things that Adam was speaking about will appear in the description below. So if you want to click on the links. But otherwise, obviously, go and check out BEACHHEAD Bournemouth. Was that what it was?
So it'll be called BEACHHEAD Brawl. But
BEACHHEAD Brawl, sorry.
BEACHHEAD is the name of the overall event, and BEACHHEAD Brawl is the 40k tournament, which will be the biggest of the tournaments taking place.
And I know
because 40k is the best, right?
Well, absolutely, without a doubt. And I also noticed the other day you've started bringing back the wondrous world of 40k Brawl. I saw a battle report pop up the other day of you versus Simon, was it, and his Gene Stealer cult?
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah, and we've actually... I can't say, can I? Because somebody might not have watched it.
Well, that's fair enough. I meant more in general, like returning to producing content and so on. Is that the first of many, or is that just a random instance?
So within Entoyment, they have a room that is supposed to... It was built to be like a role-play room, but obviously being the clever guy I was like, we can definitely use this to film some bat reps that'll adds a bit of production value.
Mm. Can I make one suggestion about the production?
You can.
Can you put a poster over the window?
Yes.
God, it's annoying watching it with that window, because it's like I'm both seeing the reflection of the guy filming, but then I can see the weird ghostly silhouettes of the people playing behind you.
But that all adds to the spice, you know. You get what are you watching? Are you watching what's going on the game, or are you watching what's happening in the battle bunker?
It has to be said, I was confused and also intrigued by what was taking place behind you. It was a very interesting.
It makes you want to go there and maybe go and play behind the glass.
Mm. You kind of need to do one of those like cheesy American intros where you get like a bit of sweeping B-roll footage of the venue where you talk about where you're playing and so on and so forth, just to kind of build it up in a big way, right?
Yes, that is an idea that has been had and we will be doing shortly.
There you go. You're going to start trying to rip off that other channel that does a bit of a better job on the overall production. I can't remember what it's called now, but they do like 40k in 30 minutes.
Is that what they do? Yeah, we do it in 18, so I don't know what they're paying it.
Well, yeah, but theirs has a little bit more information in it. Yours is just sort of, that turn ended, this thing happened, move on.
Yeah, I know. We tried to keep them short. I don't know what the world wants these days, because all the bat reps are much, much longer than they were when we first started.
I think at the end of the day, stick to your style, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if that's what you've, built a reputation on, that's what you got to kind of keep on doing, isn't it,
We've been out of the game a long time, though. The world's moved on.
The world's moved on, absolutely. We're trying or thinking about getting into doing some bat rep stuff, but it's always a weird kind of area because, again, after talking to Winters last episode, it seems like a very intense process.
It's a lot of work. Yeah, that's the problem. And that's why we stopped doing them ultimately. It just takes a lot of time to upload all the videos, edit them, and then you've got to wait for your internet to get it onto YouTube. It's just a bit of a nightmare.
It's a kerfuffle. And there you go.
It is a kerfuffle, but we want to start doing it again because we have the venue to do it, and it's a good opportunity to shamelessly plug our events that are coming up, and also events. My preference would be to go into a little bit more detail, as you just alluded to, about what we think's good, or certain combos, and talk about like fairly high level competitive 40k and what's good at that point in time. But we just by the time we filmed something, spoken about it, one of the guys has taken it back, edited it, uploaded it. What we've said was like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it might not even be relevant anymore because the game moves on pretty quick these days. So yeah,
makes sense.
But we'll continue to plug away, and I'm sure there'll be more. There was one filmed 2 weeks ago, maybe 3, so there'll be another one going up shortly.
Amazing. Well, hopefully it will already be available at the point at which this podcast goes out, and that will also be linked below. You can always have Joe on. Joe's our current reigning Lookouts, bat rep champ, right, Joe?
Yeah, I'm 1 for 1 at the moment.
Yeah, I'd probably like to get all of you on, really, at some point.
Yeah.
We're going to have a big 3v1. Is that how you want it?
Yeah.
Well, we can do 3v3. Maybe we could do that.
We could do it.
We could do a Brawl versus Lookouts team deathmatch.
Indeed.
Though all of you guys are like a bit actually, I'd say that you've got why have I just forgotten his name?
You're not very good with names, are you?
No, it's just that. Why have I forgotten his name?
Are you talking about the chap that you played doubles with?
Matt.
Yeah, Matt. Jesus, there it was. I wanted to call him Mike for the longest time there, but I was like, it's not Mike.
You literally played a tournament with him and you couldn't remember his name.
I got a lot of names in this noggin, Adam.
He's not exactly a forgettable guy either.
No, he's a lovely bloke. He was a good fun to play with. I was glad that I kind of dragged him to a victory.
He's a character.
He is. Well, he's got the Elder Flyer spam, isn't he?
Yeah, only dickheads say that, though.
Well, you say that. I mean...
Am I allowed to... Is that going to get bleeped?
That will get bleeped, yeah. But you say that, but...
That'll make it sound worse.
Yeah, no... Well, I think I think I somewhat illustrated the benefits of that with some games with him, and it was quite funny playing with Matt, because I think I've said this many times before, but I'll say it again. It was interesting playing with someone who knew so little about the army they were running.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was always good.
I'm sure he won't mind you saying that.
I think he understands. I think he consistently throughout the process was amazed and alarmed when I said, no, mate, do it like this, it does this. And he's like, what? It does that? Yeah, it does. totally blew his mind on a couple of occasions about how certain things work. And he was like, oh, shit. Oh, see, look, now I'm doing it now, Adam. You brought it out of me.
Oh dear! All the bleeps going off.
Hot now.
Oh dear! Yeah, sorry, I have that effect on people.
That's it, mate. That's it. Well, with that said, I reckon we move on to the next part of talking with Adam, which is us talking about tournament etiquette. But in the instance of, or also tournament preparation, but just to kind of break it up and make it seem like a sensible running order, we'll make a transitional noise. Woo! Hello again, everybody. Now we're going to talk about broader kind of tournament topics, specifically preparation and etiquette. So let's start with Phil, because I'm conscious of the fact that when we were talking to Adam earlier, that Phil didn't get much of a chance to say much of anything. So let's have a chance and talk about Phil, because he has a very unique perspective on tournament play. I mean, he goes to a lot of events and he is very, capable of playing the game. But you sort of almost handicap yourself a certain amount, Phil, with your army selection. So when you're preparing for a tournament, how do you kind of go about it, and what's your general kind of thought process, I suppose?
Well, in terms of building my army, so, I mean, fundamentally, you always need to look at whatever the event listing is in terms of what missions you're going to be playing, how many games you're going to be playing, that sort of thing. Understand whether it's ITC, ETC, or sort of Warhammer Worlds, sort of more official by the rule book or chapter approved type missions. So you've always got to be quite conscious about what missions you'll be playing, because that to an extent dictates the type of army or the units you'll be taking within your army. But for me personally, I always go, or normally in mind with, I'd like to win a painting competition potentially, so like the best army ones at Warhammer World tend to be the ones that I aim for. So I want sort of units that look nice or thematically fit together, or just models that I enjoy playing with, even if they're not necessarily going to be always the best units to take for every mission. So in a way, I do handicap myself in that respect. So at the moment, I'm currently painting up an Inquisitor, because I want a really nice sort of visual centerpiece for my army, even if Inquisitors aren't going to be particularly competitive. They still will add something to my army, because it'll be the only Psyker, for example, in my army, and potentially give me some more interesting close combat units. But the main reason why I'm taking them is just because they're visually going to be a bit more interesting.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense, mate, from someone's perspective that's definitely more interested in the hobby part of the hobby. Not to say that the tournament gaming side of it isn't a hobby either, but you know what I mean when I sort of express that, more the painting, modelling side of things. And, also you raise a good point also about obviously taking the time to read the document that actually explains what you're doing, because, I mean, you and I experienced this, didn't we, where we were playing in that doubles tournament where they had instilled put in a rule of 2 for the doubles, so no single player could have more than 2 of any single data sheet, with the exception of troops and transports. And in our 4th game, we came up against a guy who had taken 3 Plague Burst Crawlers, which was obviously in complete, indifference to that rule, or just didn't observe that rule at all. And as a result, we had to kind of call him on it, basically, because it sort of was like, well, hang on a second here, pal. It's probably just a little bit of a step too far, unfortunately, and that was a real shame, because I think we wouldn't necessarily have hugely changed the outcome of that game, but it would have definitely had an impact. And I think, again, taking the time to read the tournament pack is quite useful. I mean, Adam, as a TO, how often do people not read the tournament pack? And obviously, you feel free to call out the fact that I never do.
I would say. It's getting better, actually. I found as the years have rolled on, more people take it more and more seriously. But certainly still, I would say like 40% of people don't read it and just tip up and do it on the fly, which I've got a lot of time for, because that's exactly how I do things, or did things until very recently.
It's true. I remember you installed the you brought in the ITC score system with all the kind of optional objectives, and I was literally like, Adam, what have you done here? What's going on? And he were like, mate, come on, read the rules pack. And I was like, oh, can't you just tell me what you've done? Like, what is this madness? Like, explain it to me. But there you go. That's always the fun of it, really. I mean, is there any specific kind of methodology for yourself, Ad, in terms of how you approach things, or what kind of stuff you look for when you're getting into tournament mode?
So when I'm going to attend a tournament, my obviously a bit like you, I'm there to game and I'm there to win games and ultimately try and podium or win the thing. And I will normally be looking at what's doing quite well at the moment to ascertain how I'm going to write my list. And I will always focus on something that will hopefully beat what's good at the time rather than take the thing that's good at the time. So you're trying to alter the meta, I guess. Quite often, I mean, with my time being limited, I do these days tend to get slightly lazy and end up just taking the same list over and over again. More recently, but with all the time in the world, that's what I would be doing. I'd be certainly trawling Best Coast for recent events to see what's done well, watching bat reps, talking to the community, the sort of high end, the guys that are winning these events, and working out what's good, and then trying to work out either what I think can beat it or a slight tweak on what's doing well. Basically, that's how I would be running it, and then manically trying to paint an army in time to get to that event.
That makes sense. I mean, on the topic of manic painting, there doesn't come more manic than our buddy Joe here, who's just painted his 1750 GT Heat 2 army in quite an incredible span of time, or limited span of time, I suppose.
Yeah, I've painted it in about... I'd say if you stapled all the time together, I've probably spent about 3 weeks doing it over the course of about 5 weeks.
It's quite an incredible time commitment. I mean, it does look good. I mean, by your own admission, not the best one you've ever painted, but still to a very good standard.
It's one of those ones, like, I've got... I finished my last Razor Wing today, so on Thursday, and for a tournament this Sunday, basically. And then that is going to be my tournament army for a while. Because I did my Death Watch, and I was like Phil, I was like, I'm just going to play with an army I enjoy, and I'll see how it goes, and I'll just turn up, and it'll all be fun. And after a while, I started to get salty, because I was like, I don't like losing anymore. Losing sucks. So I was like, what's a good army for winning tournaments with? So I went out and I bought it, and I've been playing a lot and doing a lot of test games, and trying to get as good as I can with that one particular list. But recently, like, having a look at what's been released by GW, what's fun and popular. So obviously Chaos Knights are really popular, Custodes and the three Caladiuses are doing the rounds. So I was just like, fine, fill my army with Haywire and just go from there. So now looking at it, I'm trying to be a lot more competitive and keeping my eye out to see what I need to do to get where I need to be. Makes sense?
No, I totally understand. I mean, from my side of things, I think the broad consensus on my side of it is obviously from the outset to, approach these events, these tournaments with a very clear objective in mind. I think, if you're starting out in tournament gaming, I don't think you should naively expect that you're going to walk in and, run away with it. You could do that. I mean, it's not entirely infeasible or, impossible for that to occur, but at the same time, it's highly unlikely, because you're almost certainly, even if you fluke a couple early wins, you're almost certainly then going to start seeing more experienced, more tricksy players. And I think the road that a lot of us have kind of been on in terms of our tournament experience and what we go through is it's about kind of learning from those mistakes and learning from those early tournaments to then kind of take those learnings and continue kind of developing your play style and your approach, and also all the other kind of supplementary elements. And I always try and approach everything in terms of tournament play with a very kind of open mind and a general sense of optimism as towards how I'm going to perform in them. But at the same time, if it's not my day, it's not my day, and I don't ever intend to try and be negative about that, but actually try and use that as a lesson to take me forwards. And I think the thing I would always say is set yourself some very kind of not easy, but some very kind of entry level goals. You know, if you're going to a tournament for the first time, what's your aspiration? Is it that you're there because you just want to get some games in, and it's rare that you do, and you're just happy to see how you do? Even if that is the case, what does success look like for you in that situation? Are you gunning for a top 50%, a top 20% finish, or are you going to be content with one win and a couple losses, or however it works? So you've got to kind of layer that out in the initial instance. And then when it comes to me personally, in terms of how I approach stuff now, it's very similar to what Adam says. I spend a lot of time in the lab, so to speak, theorizing a lot of variables, and there's also a number of new variables that come into the mix all the time. And I think that's been one of the more interesting things with Grand Tournament Heat 2 that's coming around the corner. We've had that injection, that relative last-minute injection. Well, not last minute, actually. We've had that relative month-long addition to the rule set, which is Chaos Knights, and we've started to see little rumblings of them in other events and little instances where people are kind of shoehorning them in. But I do think we're going to see that develop, and certainly for someone who, like myself, who's been planning his army for an awfully long time, all of a sudden having those little nuances thrown into the mix is really interesting, because all of a sudden you start doubting or trying to kind of again continue dissecting what that represents for your army and what you're going to do. So I spent a lot of time theorizing, playtesting, maths hammering, dealing with all those kind of variables, and then at the very last minute settling on something, and then having to rush to get a very bad paint job done very, very quickly is probably the way it goes. I think all the guys here can attest to the fact that I'm usually the guy painting models the day or morning of an event. So in many respects, me talking about preparation isn't always fantastic, because I'm definitely not the guy that rocks up with a fully painted army, all lovely and wonderful, ready to go, a couple days before event. But the theory of what I'm bringing has been tested to the utmost degree, and that's where that comes. So I'm much more about the list building and the theory behind it, and the meta that I'm trying to sort of subvert or affect, and that's really where it is. But on the flip side of that, I'm very rarely fully painted at the point of which I should be. But that's all that side of things. So I probably could learn from Joe in that respect,
I guess it's that thing of, if you're always going to be chasing the meta to try and get ahead of the curve in that respect, you're always unfortunately going to be buying either new models for your army, or you're going to be buying brand new armies, because the meta might completely shift in a way which means you need a completely different army. So that's the downside of that kind of top level competitive play.
Oh gosh,
which is, for my painting speed, would be impossible to ever do, so I just don't bother trying to do it.
It's worth saying as well, I think, at its core, I've always been a Craft World Elder player, and that's always been my go-to competitive army. So even when the meta didn't overly favour Craft World Elder, I would sort of stay with them. Now, I appreciate it's been a long time since that's been a reality, but there have been occasions where that has been the case, and I've sort of stuck with them throughout that, because I feel most comfortable with that list. So I am always starting from a relative position, but it's fair to say every time I rock up to an event, I've always got something new. And also the frustration as well is I often start with a theory list, and then I'll buy it all in preparation for that just working, and then through playtesting I'll discover that I was overzealous with certain things, or over accounting for certain instances, and then I downsize certain things as well. So this GT Heat 2 army, which I haven't got around to telling people about yet, but at first I thought certain elements of it were so good that I should take even more of them than I have already, and as a result I've now got loads of those sat on the side doing nothing, which I'm a bit like, oh, that's a bit of a bummer, because they're all quite pricey. But yeah, it's one of those things where it sort of happens. But I think that's kind of the frustration of chasing the meta, I guess.
But that's a thing that comes from like playtesting as well, though. Like if you want to do good, you need to get as many games in as humanly possible. Especially with like if you are chasing the meta and you want to do good, you've got to play against those lists to know how they function and what they do. And just as well as playing against them, you kind of need to play with them in a way, so then you know that mindset of that person.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like what that person's going to do. So, like for instance, on next week, my big coming into the GT, my big concern is going to be Chaos Knights with all their negative modifiers or ignoring negative modifiers and basically just blowing everything off the table very quickly.
Well, you say all there. They've only got one thing that ignores negative modifiers.
Oh, they have, yeah. But then they've got things that get extra wounds, and then their knights get to move faster because they get extra distance. And so I'm going to be playing a couple games using those knights to kind of understand the army more. So then when I come up against someone and a situation is appearing on the table, I can think, well, what would I do in this situation, and then counteract it.
I think as well, talking to each other is also an important thing. I mean, I think, when you get into any kind of tournament scene, or if you're seeking to join a tournament scene, it's almost inevitable that you'll be seeking to do so with a friend, or you will, through the process of attending tournaments, make friends or acquaintances that you can talk about this stuff with, and that's hugely important as well. I mean, we spend probably an absurd amount of time outside of this podcast talking about what we're doing, what our ideas are, what we're trying to deal with, and we spend a lot of time kind of thrashing around ideas and critiquing what we think works and what we think doesn't work. And it's only really where we reach a point where, certainly with me anyway, where I reach a sort of consensus with these guys where most of us are going, yeah, I agree, that's pretty decent, and once we're all kind of on the same page, I'm sort of more sold, I suppose.
It's a definite thing. I your mother once said to me that you speak to me than you do to her, and all the time it's just a constant chat about Warhammer and tournament lists.
I mean, not always. Sometimes we break it up, but there's a lot of that in there, it has to be said.
We gripe about work as well.
Yeah, we gripe about work. We, talk about other stuff. I mean, I'm surprised it's not your missus who's been saying that to you.
Oh no, she's had words as well. Don't worry. So my phone will ring, and it could be any time. It'll be like 11 o'clock at night, and she'll be like, "Dan," and I'll be like, "Yeah," and then I'll just waddle away.
Yeah, exactly. I'm being called now. Off I go. But there you go. How about you, Adam? I mean, obviously you must chat to the BRAWL fellas on a regular basis about all this nonsense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I'm sure you guys have got, we have a WhatsApp group that is inundated mainly with those guys posting their relevant lists. I mean, Matt is obviously bouncing from army to army, he's constantly writing lists, and then find something else shiny that he gets distracted by, and then he's off buying that. Or so he changes a lot.
Sounds like he's the Joe of the
yeah, but he never gets as far as buying, building, and painting the army. He gets as far as buying, putting the bases together, and probably doing the bases. Some of the army gets built, then he gets distracted by something else, and then he buys that.
He has some glowing moments though. Like when I saw all of his swooping hawks that he hadn't finished painting yet, he'd done some nice little conversion bits on them, and
yeah, he always what he does, he looks good, but it's never finished. Yeah, and yeah, I'm pretty much always talking about. I to a certain, I'll always talk about like the broader strokes of my list or what I'm planning to do with people. But then I think a bit like Dan, to a certain extent, I sort of go very introvert when I think I'm getting onto the real nuances of the list and try and not let everyone know.
Yeah.
In a vain attempt to sort of conceal what I think is gold, but often turns out to be, bronze or silver. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I bounce ideas off people, and then ultimately it all gets fine tuned within my noggin, and then whatever gets delivered. Quite often, I'll write the list that I think's great, and then don't have time to build it or paint it, so I end up taking something completely different.
There you go.
Yeah, that happens as well.
So in some respects, you're one of the worst people to take advice from in terms of tournament prep.
Absolutely, and that's ultimately why I've moved into becoming a TA.
You just can't do it anymore. It's not possible.
I mean, hopefully, I have got now. I've probably got like 3 or 4 armies painted to an all right, but marginally below average standard, I would say. So I've got a few. The good thing about having a lot of stuff is you can pretty much just do what you want.
Yeah.
But I haven't got everything. It's always like 1 or 2 units that I'm missing to really do what I want to do. So,
yeah.
But I'm moving house soon. I'm going to have my own office, and it's just going to become my room to create the magic.
There you go. I think as well. I mean, there's certainly like core units in everyone's like army lists or codexes that will never kind of go out of, fashion in some way, shape, or form. Elder Craftworld, Eldari, whatever they're supposed to be called, are always going to find a use now and again for a squad of Rangers or 2. So you can pretty safely kind of get those built because they're always going to cut. Then they're never going to necessarily go out of fashion. Dark Reapers as well, same sort of deal. Although it's not rare, but you might not use them as much as you once did, but you still kind of often find a use for them. Same thing with the flyers. You kind of may as well just get yourself a relative complement of those, and there's certain things that are going to kind of stay there, and then you just sort of build in a few extra bits here and there when you need to. But yeah, no, I think, as I say, going back in terms of like from the outset of approaching tournaments, I think it's very important from the outset that you establish what it is you're there to do. Obviously, the goal really should be for everyone who goes to a tournament, as far as I can tell anyway. I mean, I appreciate some people don't share this perspective, but I think the goal of going to a tournament should be to win. I had this debate with a guy at one of the tournaments where he was not too impressed by the fact that I was taking Elder Flyers and decided to tell me about how anyone can just play Elder Flyers and it's like you just want to win at any cost, and it's like, well, yeah, of course I do. Like, I mean, was that not your objective? Like, I don't see, and it's not that I don't understand that you can be frustrated when someone brings stuff that's objectively or obviously overpowered, but also I'm always a little bit stunned, or not stunned, but just sort of taken back when someone sort of goes, "Oh, that's ridiculous. Why would you take the best thing in the game?" It's like, well, because I'm here to win.
Just to chime in there, obviously you said win at any cost. I don't think that's fair on you, Dan. You're not that guy. You're not there to win at any cost, because you're no matter how you come across on this podcast at times, you're a fairly decent chap. Whereas there are a very small number of characters out there within the community that once they get onto a 40k table, something takes over them and they just become not necessarily unbearable, but they just do things that you just think you need to bring this back down to a human level, and realizing that you're playing a game with another human being, and ultimately everyone, we play this game to win, but also to enjoy ourselves and have fun. And if you start doing things like, there are certain things that happen, like you might be playing somebody and they will roll a lot of dice very quickly, and they'll pick up dice that you might see that definitely weren't the result that they needed, or they'll be nudging models or things like that. They're the people that needs a talking to, or maybe need to be watched more closely. And they're the people that I would say are winning at any cost. People who are just bringing a very strong list that to win the game in a fair way, I personally don't have any problem with. That's good. That's healthy as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. No, and to be fair, maybe I didn't word that correctly from my side of things because
I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew you weren't one of those guys.
No, I appreciate that, mate. Thank you. I mean, and that is the thing, right? I mean, I was playing a game at a while ago, and at the start of the game, the guy I was playing against had 3 of those Forge World. Oh, I flipping can't remember the name of them. They're like their contemptors, but they've got like ridiculous guns that have like exploding 6s on top of exploding 6s.
Do you read it? Oh, what the Hellforged? Yeah, the Hellforged, the Chaos ones.
Yeah, the Chaos ones.
Decimator engines.
Decimator, that's the one.
And that might be it. Yeah.
And I played against him, and I obviously gave him my list at the start, and I explained that I'm running Samhan and Iltok, but the bikes are Samhan and so on. Anyway, I let him go first, and he started shooting at my Samhan bikes. And he started rolling 4s, and he said, yeah, 4s to hit. And I didn't sort of question it, because I know demon engines have ballistic skill 4+, so I'm like, oh, that must just be a demon engine. Fine. Because I don't really know the rules that well for them. And then in my turn 1, he had something close enough that I could declare a charge against, and then I re-rolled the charge because I'm Sam Han, and that's something Sam Han can do. And he went, oh, that's Sam Han. And I was like, yeah, it's Sam Han. Oh, I thought that was Eltok. I was like, well, no, mate, they're painted red. It's a fairly decent giveaway. And he was like, yeah, I realise that now, but yeah, I mean, I was hitting you on 4s because I thought you were Eltok. And I was like, oh, sorry, mate, I just assumed because they're demon engines that it's the demon engine rule. Or just a demon engine thing. And he was like, no. And I said, all right, mate, well, clearly there's a misunderstanding there. And I still had like 3 or 4 Wind Rider bikes left. And I said, look, to be fair with you, I'll just take all the Wind Riders off. It's fine, it's no problem. You can get your first strike, I'll take them off. Because clearly they should have all died. It's only because of the fact you were hitting them on 4s that didn't happen. And that is sort of where the etiquette comes in. Because I think at the end of the day, I already knew at that point the game was in the bag, right? Like, I already knew that this token gesture wasn't going to hugely change the outcome. But I'll be honest with you, even if it was going... But I didn't know that for sure. And to be fair, I only won that game by 1 point in the end. And having those few extra bikes probably would have secured a couple extra points, which would have made it much easier. But yeah, I think that's where we come from in terms of the etiquette side of things, is I'm always quite keen to ensure that I'm fair about stuff, and if someone has made a mistake, I will let them go back, and I will let them do things. That being said, if I'm honest, Game 6 of the Grand Tournament Finals, I didn't pull any punches, because, as I said to my opponent, I was like, mate, under any other circumstances, in any other situation, I would let you get away with this, but we are where we are. We're 4 wins, 1 loss, and if I beat you in this game, I can podium at the Grand Tournament Finals. I'm sorry, mate. Like, I'm going to use all the tricks that I've got to make this, go in my favour. And he almost
absolutely,
yeah. And in that context, fair enough. But all the games prior to that, leading up to that, you have that flex, I suppose. I don't know. How do you feel about that, Ad?
My take on it, which I think is echoed by a lot of the sort of top players who I've heard, and certainly the recently past Jeff Robinson, who, if you guys definitely would have heard the news. That was out with this being released when it is. That will all be old news, but sadly he passed away recently. He was always a very strong advocate for, at the beginning of your game, putting in place a social contract with your opponent to say, this is the kind of game I want to have. And this is how I want to sort of play it. So if you make a mistake and we're still in that same phase and you want to go back and do it, yeah, you're going to say it, or you're going to have the game where you say, no, actually, we're going to play this, by the rule, like a game of chess, and there's no takesy backsies. So how I would have played those games that you were just speaking about is obviously games 1 to 4. You can say, yeah, all right, we're going to have quite a flexible game here where we can cut each other a bit of slack. But then on the key games, with your opponent, you'll say, look, I want to have, I want. There's a lot on the line. Let's play it by the rule. Let's play it to the line. And if you make a mistake, you make a mistake. We're all adults. If we make a mistake, we just have to live with it.
Yeah,
but in those high pressure situations, they do happen. But as long as you've had that conversation at the beginning and set out what type of game you want to have, I think that's how you play those games. You just put it on the line, and then you both know where you stand, and there's no sort of animosity when it does happen, because you've put that line in the sand, and you know what the boundaries you're working within.
Although it's fair to say, Adam, when you and I played together on those rare instances in tournaments, you're a very cruel man.
Yes, but you're different because I'd consider you a friend, and if it's somebody, if you're playing one of your, it's a good point though, because there have been good friends that have fallen out at the Warhammer tournaments, and to be honest, if it ever got to it, I'd concede at the point, because they're, ultimately it's a game of toy soldiers.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean,
unless it was the final of the LVO and there's $4.5 at stake, I'll take it then.
Yeah, no, absolutely, mate. Although it's fair to say as well, because I think me, Phil, and Joe, alongside my buddy Mike, who has never probably been mentioned or rarely talked about, it's fair to say we probably had one of the best games of 40k ever, didn't we? A tournament where we randomly got pitted together.
Yeah, and we just abused each other, both physically and verbally, and probably even mentally across the table, to the point where, like, the organisers were considering splitting us up.
I mean, that is they're the best kind of games.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Totally agree. I mean, Phil and Joe had brought an interesting combination of, what was it you guys had that time? Was it that when you still had Imperial Knights, Joe?
That was when I had my Salamanders drop pod army.
Was it
and
Salamanders? Is that how you remember it, Phil?
To be honest, I don't really remember much except the swearing. So I think it's Salamanders, yeah.
It's because you were running the Sky Shield landing pad at the time, and I used it to drop all my drop pods on it.
That was it, yeah. We were running the Sky Shield landing pad in 7th because Mike was running Blood Angels and I had Crimson Fists. That was it, yeah. God, what a game. That was hilarious. Good times. Good times all around. But, I mean, Phil, from your side of things, have you had to encounter much in the way of controversy or difficulties when playing in tournaments, and how do you tend to approach that stuff?
I guess it depends on what thing it is in particular. Not on the whole, I think I've done quite well. I've come across people where it's just a bit difficult sometimes, in terms of they're very adamant on something. Normally it tends to be a clash in rules, so the last GT that we went to, quite a few people would have models touching terrain but not being within it, such as a guy had a vehicle and it was touching, the base was touching a bastion, and he's like, I'm 25% obscured, I get a cover save. And I'm like, well, you don't, because you're not within the terrain. You can't just be touching it to gain it. And there was a bit of a hoo-ha of looking through the rules to work out who's correct and stuff.
Plus he needed to be 50% obscured, so he was double wrong.
Oh, well, I'm sure it was 50 at that point. I'm just doing it as a point of principle. But, so those things can be quite difficult, and sometimes you've got to get the rule book out and you've got to try and find an answer. And sometimes, especially with the terrain rules as they were prior to chapter, it proved it was quite difficult sometimes to find some of them because they were in different places in the book. So you've got to be aware of those sorts of issues. I think there's some ways to mitigate things. So sometimes if you're sort of moving within 12 inches of someone because you want to charge or you want to rapid fire or something, in the movement phase it's really good to be quite explicit in terms of, okay, so I'm moving here and I'm now like within 12 inches of your model, and like you get them to check, or I've deployed this unit here, so it's hidden from that knight on your side of the table. Can you see that model? And that was something that Jeff Robinson was really good at, and he was always saying, if you're very explicit to them about your intentions for your turn, then they can't turn around and be like, oh, that's just outside of 12 inches, or, oh, I can actually see that model and I'm now going to shoot at it, for example. So doing those kind of little things there are really good at mitigating those kind of arguments that you could have over the table over relatively petty things. Quite often it boils down to. I think there's some general etiquette stuff as well, like as Adam was saying about like rolling dice. So it took me a while to realise, because I think some things are just like unspoken, so you don't necessarily know about them. So it's like you should always pick up your misses and not the hits. So your opponent always has a chance to check that every dice is over a 4-up, for example. And quite often I won't, I'll miss a dice or two, and the opponent be like, oh, look, there's a 1 in there. And I'm like, oh, thanks, because I just didn't spot it. And it's not because you're cheating. It's just because in the heat of the moment you sometimes get a bit flustered, or you just don't see all the dice that you've scattered across the table, for example. So there's lots of little etiquette things, like practical things that you can do. Like I said, don't roll your dice particularly fast. Make sure you pick up your misses. Give your opponent plenty of time to look at the dice. Always ask them like what you're hitting on, for example, or be very explicit about what you're rolling before you roll it. And I've had some opponents where they just roll buckets of dice and they're not saying what they're doing, and you're like, okay, so what are you hitting on? Because maybe one of my units will have a minus to hit modifier, or maybe it's a different toughness from what you think it is because you haven't played my army before. So it's always good when you're being clear and they're being clear about what every interaction is.
Yeah, 100%. I think as well with that stuff, it's always interesting as well when you encounter players who start to kind of operate in that fashion even after you've had conversations or tried to address those situations early on, because I myself have found myself in situations where I'm playing people who early doors are fairly alright with a situation, but then quickly discover that things aren't quite going their way or something's changed, and then they get very quickly turned into like, again, I had a funny example once where I was playing a lad who had loads and loads and loads of guardsmen, and it was like, okay, cool, loads of guardsmen, whatever. And it got to a point where I was like, well, hang on a second here. That was a 10-man squad 5 minutes ago, and now that I've shot it and killed 7 things, you're telling me there's still 6 people alive? Like, what's occurred? And again, there's little instances where those sort of funny things occur, and it's how you try and like address them. And again, it's not about kind of having a full-blown row with people, but just kind of confronting the nonsense and trying just to kind of address it without being too aggressive about it. Because I find, and look, I don't want to paint a bad picture of anybody, and I don't want to suggest that everyone in the community is like this, but I think, as Adam has alluded to, as Joe's talked about, as Phil has somewhat alluded to as well, there are people, when they get in front of a game of 40k, can exhibit some interesting attributes, and some people do like to try and shout you down or tell you, or try and kind of use their words to try and kind of assert some kind of dominance in that situation. But you shouldn't tolerate that stuff, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if there are tournament organisers, there is a accepted code of conduct within these things, and if someone's going to start being more kind of aggressive to try and get their way, I always recommend trying to seek some kind of outside help to sort of move it along.
Absolutely, call a TO over. I mean, to be honest, everything we've sort of covered here really is nicely covered under the ITC Code of Conduct, which is a fairly comprehensive document. I don't know if any of you guys have had a chance to have a read through it, but all of that, it all basically alludes to the fact that, in a nutshell, you need to play the game within the spirit of the game and in a fairly humane manner. So it gives you examples of if you're going to roll dice, you must announce what you're rolling the dice for before you roll them. If you're going to move a model, you must clearly explain what you're doing before you do each action, so that it says the impetus is on your opponent to listen to what you're saying. And because I've been had an experience where I've been organising or judging, and I've had somebody who claimed they had announced it does get difficult because you can have somebody who claims they announced that they were going to use a command point reroll, and they've rolled it, and then their opponent will then say, oh, well, actually, I'm going to Agents of Vex that after they've rolled the dice. Because they've seen the result and they've seen that it's going to affect the game. And it's because that's like a little grey area where, because the stratagem should be used after they've declared that they're going to use the command point reroll, not after they've rolled the dice and they know it's actually going to affect the game. Yeah. But yeah, where do you draw the line? Do you say, well, you've got to leave 5 seconds after declaring that you're going to use this stratagem? So there are still grey areas. It's not all clear cut.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been times when I've declared something like, "Oh, I'm going to advance," and I've rolled a 6, and then the opponent clearly hasn't been listening to what I'm doing, and then it's like when he does look, I'm like, "Look, I rolled a 6 for my advance roll," and then you almost get a guilty feeling that they think that you've just like fudged the roll or made it up. And it's like, I'm sure maybe they don't, and I'm just being like super paranoid because you don't want to be accused or seen to be cheating, even if you're not. And quite legitimately, sometimes you're just trying to move the game on and do things relatively speedily to be within the time limit. But then you don't want to feel like, if they haven't listened or they're not necessarily concentrating on the game, because quite often people come up to yourself or your opponent when you're playing and like have a chit chat with them because they're mates or they know them, for example. So you've got to be aware that those sorts of little weird, awkward situations can happen.
I mean, in the interest of trying to wrap up this topic, I thought it might be quite interesting if we could each express our one major pet peeve with tournament opponents, their conduct and attributes that ultimately frustrate us the most. So let's start with Joe if we can. Joe, what do you like least in a 40k opponent?
When you get to the table and your opponent basically tells you that they are God's gift to Warhammer, basically.
They talk you through how the game's going to finish.
Is that
they'll come to the table and they'll be like, I'm the best. Like, oh, I do this. I play all the time. I'm best friends with my local GW manager. I'm best friends with this podcaster and this podcaster. Which, because it's like saying, I listen to loads of music. I'm a great musician. People like that. It was like, to give an example, back in 7th edition, I was running my Harlequins in a doubles event, and I was with Phil. And this guy came to the table and he was like, my brother's the store manager of Paul's store. And like, I play all the time. I know all the rules. You're running Harlequins. They're crap. So we're just going to ignore you. We're just going to deal with the guard. And instantly, you're like, I don't like this person.
Although, don't you name drop all the time and talk about all the people you know in your podcast and stuff?
No. I don't like talking about our podcast. I'm just friends with a lot of people, but I don't feel the need the moment I meet someone to tell them all the things that I know.
Yeah, but that's your social currency, Joe. If you don't tell them, how will they know?
Well, if you're going to tell someone like, "Oh, I do a podcast. I'm friends with Adam Shepherd-Jones," I'll be like, then I'll just wait for it to come up in a conversation. Not
mate, there you go.
Just,
Not at the very start. No, I understand that, mate. I think as well. It's interesting as well because it adds your point adds the interesting dynamic, and this isn't a pet peeve by my account. But what I'm saying is from our side of things, as people who do this kind of stuff, you do also use these events as an opportunity to try and tell people. You're like, oh, by the way, just so you know, I will probably talk about this on my podcast, and and people then like, oh, you got a podcast, and and then they kind of politely try, take down the details, and whether they actually go on to listen or not, who knows? I've seen a couple of instances where that has been the case, but it's not always the factors, or the way that it goes. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I always feel incredibly self-conscious about when I bring that stuff up because it's. I don't know, it just feels, like you say, it feels a bit over the top to kick off a encounter with a new person with, by the way, I do this podcast and,
Aren't I great?
aren't I great? Absolutely. It's probably a bit much. But at the same time, I do want them to know about the podcast because I quite like more listeners.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a line, isn't there? I think you can have a sort of slightly unassuming conversation and drop in if you want to. The fact that you have, you guys run your podcast, or I, for example, have a YouTube channel or run tournaments. I think I'm probably guilty of telling people I'm a tournament organizer at tournaments. Certainly, I've definitely dropped that in, but you kind of, like Dan says, you kind of got to, well, don't have to, but it's kind of, it feels like you need to, because you want what you're doing to be more successful to a certain extent. But there's a way and means of going about things, and maybe trying to do it in a way that isn't like boastful or arrogant. Then if you can try and portray it in that way, then you're onto a winner. If you're just literally brashly going in and saying, I do this and I'm amazing and you're nothing to me, then then you're going about things the wrong way, and you probably need to work on your life skills. But I might be that person.
You might be. Do you turn up to the table with a book of signatures and photos of you with celebrities? This is me on the red carpet with so-and-so.
Yeah.
I'd say the only exemption to this is if that person is legitimately famous within that niche, or just a famous person. I don't know, but and you know that they're famous, kind of thing.
I have to admit, the first time I ever played a game against Lawrence was super weird because I didn't know who he was. I could tell he was associated with something because he was wearing a T-shirt that was clearly, some kind of YouTube channel thing, and there were a bunch of other people wearing it. And it was pretty obvious that he was pretty popular because a bunch of kids and other hobbyists were crowding round the table pretty quickly and kept trying to go up to him and talk to him and all the rest of it. And that did put a bit of an initial kind of like, what is going on here type vibe to the whole thing. So yeah, very weird. That was strange experience.
Yeah.
There we go.
So Adam, what's yours then?
I to be honest, I mean, I've played a lot of tournaments, and I think I think I alluded to it earlier on. I think the only time I ever get slightly annoyed with people is when they roll dice for an action that they've not declared at all, or done anything, and then pick resolve an action for something that they've not declared in any way, because you just don't know. They might have just been, for example, take a leadership and roll really lowly, so they've decided it's for something else. I mean, obviously that's unlikely to ever happen, but there are instances where you need to roll high or need to roll low, and they roll the dice, and then it appears they've then decided what it's for. Like that good example is like psychic powers. Like, so somebody might roll an 11 and go, "Oh, that was smite," and I'm like, "Well, was it? Because you haven't even said what it was." Yeah. So that's the sort of, it's the not stating your intent before you roll dice. Yeah. I don't like, and as I've got older and wiser, that's the sort of conversation I have before a game starts. If I've not played a particular opponent before, that's the sort of thing I'll say, and it all stems from the work that the guys at Frontline did to put the ITC code of conduct in place. Because if you read through that and take little snippets from it, because you don't want to go through all of it, you'll generally, as long as you have those sorts of conversations before you game, you'll find the number of games that you have that are bad experiences less and less, unless the person you're playing is a super tool. But there are very few of those really out there.
No, agreed. One of the most common instances I see of people doing that is when they roll like a command reroll, and then they roll the dice, and then they roll low, and they go, "Oh, okay, I didn't get the CP back. Now let's see what the reroll is." And you're like, "What?"
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was the reroll. No. I just wanted to see if I got the CP. All right, okay, yeah. Sure.
You've got to say what. Yeah, it's a top tip, listeners. Don't be that guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell people what you're rolling for before you roll the dice.
Yeah. How about you, Phil? What's top of your list?
Oh, I think I've got a few, so I don't quite know which one to pick. But the one that I found problematic a few times, and it's quite rare actually, just due to how tournaments work. But it's like they don't have their army out, like visible at the time. Like they've got it under the table, for example, and they're sort of talking through the list, and they give me their army list because you're meant to like swap army lists at the very beginning. My personal preference, though, is just to show them my army and then talk through it and be like, this is what each unit is. But when someone's saying, oh yes, I've got all these things, but I can't visually see what the units are, so then when they are setting up, or I just have to be like, oh, can you get them out so I can see what everything looks like? Because I'm not someone that's played every single army, so I don't often know what a unit is just from its name.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's super. Or like when they get to the table and they're like, okay, let's roll the deployments. Let's see who goes first. Okay, do you want to go first or second? And it's like I don't even know what I'm playing against.
Yeah.
Like that is annoying.
Yeah, I think at that stage it's really important to ask lots of questions, like basic stuff like, who's your warlord? What's the warlord trait if they haven't told you? What does it do? What's your faction specialty? Sometimes I'll ask really broad questions and be like, what have you got that's anti-tank? What have you got that can like move over 12 inches or potentially charge me at turn 1, depending on what the deployment type is? Just general stuff like that, so I get a good idea of what their army can do and what are the threats that I'm sort of most concerned with.
That makes a lot of sense, mate. I think, again, that's good advice for anyone from the initial beginnings. I saw once on, I can't remember the name of the channel now, I think it's D6 Evolution, or something along those lines. They're very competitive-focused podcast, YouTube channel. They had created a document that they were recommending you printed out and took with you with tournaments, where you could actually ask these questions in a kind of questionarium and then go through and tick off what does what, or what has this and what has that. And I find that is probably a step too far with that stuff, because I think at that point, if someone turned around to me and gave me like the questionnaire and said, you now need to tell me what's in your list and point out the stuff, I'd just be a bit like, come on, mate, like, wow, bringing a clipboard along is probably a bit much. But at the same time, the core principles of what they're trying to get across, having those conversations, as you said, Phil, is absolutely right. You definitely need to reaffirm things and check things. And also, when they've got like models that, like a lot of the time, like for example, with like Drakari, most people have got Archons coming out of their, eyeballs, because they're the only HQ choice. And, as a result, you might be playing someone with 3 to 4 Archons, and it's like, right, okay, which one of these is the Warlord? What's he got? What, like trying to get your head around that is super important.
What about you, Dan? What's yours?
So mine is when people get super disinterested in the game, and that really bugs me. And it's mostly, I find, an occurrence that happens in doubles tournaments, but it can happen in singles tournaments as well. If the game is lost and you don't want to play anymore, by all means concede. But if you're going to keep playing, let's keep playing. Like, I find it very annoying and very weird when you've got an opponent who is a bit of a sore loser, who seemingly just wants to kind of play on, but is doing so begrudgingly. And I think that is a bit of a frustration, because one, it doesn't make you feel especially good about your game and your performance and your experience within that. But equally, I don't really understand what you're getting out of it as the individual who gets really kind of huffy about the situation. So yeah, that's a bit of a peeve of mine, is when people completely and utterly kind of turn around on you and get really kind of disgruntled about the way the game's going, and start, kind of becoming disinterested, or start talking about other stuff, and, start trying to, like, start telling you about, the dice, or, if I brought this army, it would have done better, and, that's ridiculous, and all this stuff. It's like, okay, cool, man. Well, especially within formats where points count for so much. I mean, at the end of the day, if you become disinterested and you go off for a half an hour long toilet break, I'm at a point where I'm like, well, can you not just concede, mate? Because at the end of the day, me killing everything in your army has a positive impact to my performance overall. So I'd honestly just prefer you to call it a day than deal with this. And it's rare that it happens. Most people, you know, stay the course and keep interested. But I have seen a couple of occasions, especially when there's like groups of people playing together at events, where people realise they're losing and then they start going off and talking to their mates, going, "Hey, can I chat to you about how your game's going?" Or can I, you know, like, they just completely lose interest, and I find that really annoying. But, you know, maybe that's the price I pay for being so darn good at it.
Well,
You made a good point, but... Go on, Joe.
Yeah, it's definitely like, because we played an event and we were absolutely destroying this enemy team. And one of the guys just left the table. He just walked off.
Yeah.
Started talking to other people, chatting and laughing. And when it came to like their turn, he started models on the table. But he completely checked out.
Yeah.
And his teammates like, come here, come over here. We're going to call him Colin in this. Colin, come here, Colin. And the guy's like, what? And it's like, you got play the game. And then like his teammates like apologising, and then he comes over, he does his stuff reluctantly, and then he bimbles off again at the end of the turn, forgetting that it's now our turn to do stuff to him.
Yeah.
And his mate's like, "I'm so sorry." It's like, "Oh, it's fine. It's like, okay, go shoot at this unit. Whose unit? Oh, it's Colin's. Great. Where is he?
Yeah.
He's in the bar." Like, it's just like, yeah, those people. It's like he's better off just going. His teammate's going to be called Steve in this instant. Steve, I'm going. And Steve could be like, cool, I'm taking control. You leave and come back in an hour.
Yeah.
And that would be all right. But that makes him a bad teammate.
Indeed.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it does happen from time to time. But my advice to you is just be more of an engaging opponent. And Dan, maybe you shouldn't just kick people so hard, maybe.
Well, I feel like, I mean, to be fair, it's rare that it's ever actually happened in singles games. I think most people in singles games will just concede at that point, so it's a bit of an irrelevancy in that instance. It's more the doubles. I've seen it happen so many times in doubles where people just lose interest. And, you know, maybe it is that their portion of the army has been removed, so they go, well, that's it, I'm off. But it's like, well, no, because your ally, your teammate is still there playing on, and and that person is now in a 2v1 situation, even if 800 points of their army is still alive and me and Joe collectively only have 800 points. Yeah, okay, fair enough, your army that was designed to do a certain thing has fulfilled its function, has now been removed from play, but your mate still needs someone to kind of bounce ideas off, or kind of, you know, to compete with the fact that he's up against two people. But I have seen a lot of instances, certainly where one opponent gets removed from play in the typical sense that they then also check out in terms of wandering off and abandoning their teammate. And I just think it's really bad form, I think, in some regards. I think like you gotta look out for your buddy, and try and, you know, because you might have found that if you stuck around, you'd win, you know. But yeah, I don't know. It was a recent instance that then sort of piqued my interest. And the other pet peeve I have, if I can spare myself an extra one, is people who are better at the game than me. Ooh. They wind me up.
Yeah.
But that, with all that said, I reckon that's enough talk about tournaments and tournament etiquette. And with that, we will be saying goodbye to Adam, who has made a worthy contribution to the overall podcast, as always. Any last closing words from you, Adam?
Not really. Not apart from maybe get involved in the Tournament 40K Brawl tournaments that are coming up. There's one on 3rd of August. There's one on which is pointless me saying that because this is going out on 3rd of August.
Yep.
But there's also one on the first week of October, which will be going out very shortly. Rules pack.
Does it have a fun name?
Oh, it will. TBC currently.
There you go.
I think October might be a winter war in the carry-on from the Salisbury days, but I might. haven't quite decided that yet.
Not Halloween themed then.
Oh, Halloween Havoc. That's what it normally is, isn't it?
Yeah, got to go with the old.
Or we could go like political and do like Brexit Bash or something, because that's happening.
That is happening. The Brexit Bash could be a winner.
Brexit Brawl.
Brexit Brawl. Beautiful. Fantastic.
Yeah. Who knows? And then obviously the big one, which we've already, depending on which way you stitch the thing together, the big one in February, the 200-man event in Bournemouth.
The hopefully 200-man event in Bournemouth.
Oh, it's going to be 200-man. Get involved, kids.
100%.
Sign up.
Me and Joe already bought our tickets, right, Joe?
I haven't bought my ticket yet. I've got to wait till payday. I will get it then.
He stated his intent.
Exactly.
The intention's there.
Exactly. I bought my ticket. I also offered my services as a TO, but Adam said, "No, I've got your money now. Stay."
Well, I wish I had your money. I don't have anybody's money. None of it goes to me. I'm merely an enabler.
You sure, Adam? You're not skimming off some of the cream.
I should be, but no, I'm not. I'm doing it out of the. I promise. I wouldn't be telling you. Oh, you never know. You might sort me out. But currently, I'm doing it for the love of the game.
You might get Nando's out of it.
Oh, hopefully, cheeky Fernando's.
Absolutely, mate. Should be good. So, Adam, do you want to take us on with a transitional noise of your very own?
I can't do any transitional noises. No, absolutely not.
Brilliant.
I think you do the woo 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 one that you do. Who does it?
I do it, but I feel
actually, can we do? I'm gonna do a request. Can we have the Joe's goat noise?
All right, fine. Joe.
Yeah.
What? Seriously?
Make the goat noise, mate. Make the goat noise.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, as is the way of things around here on good old Lookout Serve 40k, we like to talk about upcoming events, specifically Grand Tournaments, as some of you will already be aware. And as you will have hopefully noted from the last two episodes involving Tim's Grand Tournament list and also Joe's Grand Tournament list, we are going to now talk to another member of the Lookout Serve 40k crew about their 40k Grand Tournament Heat 2 army lists, and it is none other than the exceptional individual known as Richie. How you doing, buddy?
I'm feeling very flattered. I'm exceptional. That's very nice. So very kind of you.
I know. I know. I thought you were going to be more impressed by the fact that I said that you were a member of the Lookout Sir crew there. You always seem to have that kind of complex about you these days.
Well, now that Joe's given me the keys to the social media channels, I feel I am officially like a member now, so it's quite exciting.
Well, that's it, mate. You've finally knocked down the door. You're in. It's all on you now.
Now, I'll give it a week until I upset someone and you take them away.
Oh, mate, I upset people all the time, as it were, which is never my intent, but seemingly what occurs. I've had a few funny little back and forths in the old YouTube comment section, which, to be fair, is only a place for, funny back and forths, I suppose. That's really where they take place. And you mentioned Joe, and Joe is here. How you doing, Joe?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Richie's actually got all of us here, which is quite nice. So as Tim was renegated to just you.
It is true. It is true. Although that would indicate that Tim is also here, but Tim is not.
So he's but we're all. I'm doing good. We're all good. Good.
It's good. It's good. No pressure. The most of you to heckle my list.
Well, exactly. It's solid back paddling there. So yes, obviously as well, we've got good old Phil. You all right, Phil?
I am good indeed.
Yeah,
although I'm still trying to work out my GT list, so we'll get there for the next episode.
I was going to say you and me both, mate, which is why those do not yet feature. But yeah,
we've only got one more show until then.
Maybe I'll.
I think this, to be honest, Dan, I think this is a ploy, so you don't tell anyone what your list is before you get there.
Well, the way I pitched it to Dan was I'll do mine next week, which will be the episode that goes out when we're at the GT, and chances are Dan's likely to do the best out of all of us because he's the most competitive. So we'll do him in the following episode where he can then also at the same time talk about how he did So it'll be a combo episode.
A combo episode. See,
That assumes he does well, and if he doesn't, then it will look really stupid. So it's all on you, basically.
Exactly. We're gambling hard on my.
We are stacking the deck in his favour.
Well, exactly. Well, I took a version. I can't say for certain whether or not this list will end up that I took to this event last weekend. Will be the one that I take to the GT Heat. But I did just win a tournament last weekend with this army. Joe came second at it as well, didn't you, Joe?
I did. I actually came second with my GT list. I actually posted 3 straight wins as well. It was a three game day, which is good for me because I haven't done that since 8th edition came out. So I'm pretty confident going into Heat 2.
Yeah, and interestingly, the event is one that we were already talking about earlier in the podcast with Adam, that at the time hadn't happened yet, but at the point of us recording this, has happened. So it's one of those weird conundrums with how we record this and how we put this out. But all the same, we went to an event. Joe invited me to it as well. There's the funny thing. So had Joe not invited me, he would have come first.
Yeah, I could have actually gone all the way, I reckon.
I think, well, you did.
I did go all the way. I just would have just got those extra points. Because the sad reality of the whole situation is that you, over the 3 games, you won because you got five victory points more than I did. Because we got the exact same secondaries.
Yeah, I couldn't get Slay the Warlord in the last game, and you couldn't get... well, you didn't get First Strike in the second game, was it?
Yeah, I couldn't get that, so I kind of lost out on that, which is a bit annoying.
Yeah, it's a bugger, mate. But there you go. Anyway, enough of all that noise. Should we talk about what Richie's going to be taking to Grand Tournament E2? Richie, what's the list?
What is this? Let me tell you what the. So how is the format? I have been listening to the other podcast. Just want to remember the format. Do you want me to tell you the whole list, or do you go unit by unit?
Well, yeah, just sort of run down the whole kind of list and then unit by unit. Yeah, I mean, just take it from from the top really. So start with the first detachment, what it comes from, and yeah, what it contains.
Okay, so I've got 3 detachments. I'll start with my first detachment, which is my most favourite unit in the game to play with right now. So it's a super heavy auxiliary detachment with a Knight Gallant. Which I couldn't not bring a Knight Gallant because it's just so much fun to play with. So that's my first attachment.
Which house is that?
I haven't specifically decided, but I'm probably going to go with Crast.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'll probably go with Crast because I'll likely give it an Heirloom and Exalted Court to give it the reroll 1s, and then either the 2-up armor save or the Paragon Gauntlet, depending on the situation. At previous tournaments, I've taken the Knight Gallant, and the mission, I'm forgetting offhand the name of it, but where you don't get the invons in the middle. That one.
Narrow the Search.
Narrow the Search. I found that having a Knight Gallant with a 2-up save is incredibly useful on that mission. So I sometimes go for that rather than something like the Paragon Gauntlet. So that's detachment 1, the Super Heavy Auxiliary. Then I've got 2 battalions for the other 2 detachments. The first one is a Astra Militarum detachment, which includes 2 HQ choices. It's got a company commander and an Elysian company commander. 3 troop choices, which is 2 Elysian drop trooper squads and 1 infantry squad, all bare bones, and 1 flyer, which is a vulture gunship. Now, this particular attachment, just for clarity, it's Astra Militarum, so it has no doctrine benefits. Elysians don't gain any doctrine anyway, they just automatically gain deep strike, so this is a cheap detachment in order to get a bunch of troops, and also some Elysians who are a big fan of the Elysians, love them to pieces, and I wanted to have the opportunity to deep strike in with them, and also love a vulture. So that's detachment number 2.
It's worth saying that having a flexible kind of mass of bodies that you can have deep striking in from turn 2, turn 3 is hugely valuable in competitive play at the moment, what with the emphasis on, points acquisition throughout. So, yeah, I completely support the idea of splitting it up between Elysians and regular guard, I suppose, because, yeah, it gives you a lot of very good tactical flexibility, which is awesome.
Yeah, and it's actually more flexible. I mean, technically, I can make all of them deep strike, with like air quotes, because if I want to, I could give the dagger to suck or whatever it's called to the regular company commanders. Then all of those squads can be coming in later if I needed to. So that's an option.
Will you be taking the relic where you regain CPs on the any of the commanders as well, or are you not worried about that?
I might be. My primary source of trying to regain CP is, and he comes into any of the detachments, is the operative requisition sanctioned stratagem to give me access to an assassin, and I'm going to take the Vindicare probably 9.9 times out of 10, and using his ability to gain CP for killing characters. That's going to be my primary way of getting CP back. But I could equally, pay 1 CP to get the Imperial Commander's Armory, and then I'm mostly thinking of using it to get the laurels of command and give that to the Elysian Company Commander. For those not familiar, what that means is every time you issue an order on a 4+, you can give the same unit a second order, which means that when he issues the Dock Trooper squads, first rank fire, second rank fire, which effectively means you're then dropping 40 lasgun shots at something, I can also add reroll ones to hit on a 4+. Which is a pretty... I started using that combo recently, and I've actually found it really effective. So that's what I'll consider doing that. Then for my final detachment, this is where things are getting a bit interesting. It may go very well, it may go very badly, but we've run the numbers, and it looks like it could be very good. This is a Space Marines battalion of Imperial Fists in the Siege Breaker cohort, specialist detachment from Vigilus Defiant.
Vigilus Defiant, yeah.
Yep. And the HQ choices are a captain in Phobos armor, a Tech Marine, 3 scout squads, bare bones with bolt guns, and 2 heavy support choices. One is a Centurion Devastator squad with Hurricane Bolters and Heavy Bolters, 5 of them, and then a Land Raider Crusader with 2 Hurricane Bolters and a Twin Assault Cannon. And altogether, that's exactly 1750 points.
I mean, that is a lot of fantastic toys for 1750 points right there. You got the Vulture, the Gallant, the Assassin, the Land Raider, the Centurion squads. I mean, you've got a lot of pretty devastating toys to play around with.
I know, and we have spent at least 2 weeks debating how to fit all of those toys into the army to make it work. Because the big strategy behind this is, well, one I love the Vulture, have to have a Vulture. Love a Gallant, have to bring a Gallant. Love the Vindicare, have to bring a Vindicare. And when I was approaching this tournament, I was wanting to be something maybe a bit more competitive than normal, and originally I was going to be taking Bobby G and what they called the Aggressors. I was doing Bobby G, Aggressors, and Repulsors. That was kind of my original thought process to get all those reroll ones and stuff, but it seemed a bit samey, a bit expensive to Bobby G, putting all the eggs in one basket. Then started reading around more of the units, and I stumbled across the Siegebreaker cohort. Specifically, that the Centurions in that game gain there's a special stratagem that you can use on that, which is all 6+ to wound. Which is we pick a unit, and when you shoot at a vehicle or a Titanic unit, all 6+ to wound cause a mortal wound in addition to any regular damage. And the amount of shots that a Centurion Devastator squad can put out is an awful lot. It's a ridiculous amount of shots. And if you couple that with Bolter Drill, which the Imperial Fists get access to, then on every 6+ to hit, you get an additional additional shot as well. And I spent a little while trying to figure out how could you buff that, because Bolter Drill's kind of not looked at as, it's an interest to Bolter Drill as opposed to Bolter Discipline, which does affect the Centurions because they can shoot their Hurricane Bolters even if they move, which is pretty cool. And Bolter Drill, every 6+ to hit means you get an extra shot. Looks as kind of a middling stratagem. It's kind of okay. It's best on things like Centurions, which get a lot of shots, but it only procs on 6, so it's not that useful. However, I stumbled across a combo of using the Phobos Captain, which is that he has a Warlord trait called called target priority, which means he can pick a friendly unit within 6 or 3, one of the two, and he can say, you guys get +1 to hit this target for a friendly unit, which means that then the Centurions will be procking bolter drill on a 5+, which all of a sudden means now you're getting 33% extra shots. And because he's a captain and they've got +1 to hit, that's basically you're hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s on everything. So that's almost a guaranteed 33% extra shots. And then you combine that with the 6+ to wound. 6+ to wound cause mortal wounds. We ran the numbers, and basically there's nothing in the game that isn't like an actual Titan that in theory doesn't drop.
Yeah, it does do phenomenally well in terms of the numbers. I mean, again, I've got the figures that we ran at the time, which I can tediously go through just for a moment.
Well, we don't have to like go through like line by line for it.
In essence, if you fire say 72 Hurricane Bolter shots with re-rolling 1s, you should in theory get an extra 28 hits from 72 Hurricane Bolter shots, which is pretty good.
That's not bad. What about if you come up against an army that's got a lot of negatives to hit?
Well, then obviously, yeah, that...
Well, it doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
Obviously. I mean, it just says each Centurion has 18 shots, and then is 18 shots. Yeah, 6 for the heavy bolters.
Yeah.
12 for the Hurricane Bolter.
Yeah.
So you times that by 5 of them. That's 90 shots. There you then add 33%. That gives you 120 shots. And then you divide that by 6, means you're getting on average 20 mortal wounds.
Yeah, it's quite an impressive amount of mortal wounds that you can do. I mean, I think, again, because haven't you given the captain the relic that also... Is it a relic or was it something else?
It is a relic. It is a relic because, yeah, to make it work, I couldn't get a lieutenant in, but there is, fortuitously, in the Siegebreaker cohort list, the specialist attachment, there is a special relic which is basically turns your captain into a lieutenant, which means that Siegebreaker cohort units within 6 get to reroll 1s to wound in shooting. Which means that 20 could well be 21, 22 maybe. Which means that basically they can delete a knight just with bolter fire. But it means equally it can be good against flyers. One of the test games against you, Dan, unfortunately, because you helped me put the list together, you knew exactly what to avoid. So you deployed really far back, and I couldn't deal with your flyers. But I did nearly kill one with just the heavy bolters alone.
I think as well, though, and again, that was where the Land Raider conversation came from, though, right? Because
it was, yes, yeah. The idea, so that's a devastating amount of shots. Even if you ignore the mortal wounds thing against vehicles, that's still 120 bolter shots that are flying across the board at multiple, at least one unit. So that's like any horde clearance, big vehicle's going to be dropping to that. But in the test games we played, the trouble was the Hurricane Bolt was only 24 inches range, and the Centurions only move 4 inches. And if you're on the board turn 1, you're probably going to get shot. Especially if you're telling everyone on a podcast how good they are.
Well, indeed. That's probably not the best plan, but there you go.
It's not the best plan. That's why I should have done a U and not told anyone until after the event.
Well, that's it.
What I'm taking. But if anyone wants to DM me and give me some PayPal donations, I'll tell you what Dan's taking. No, I wouldn't do that to you.
Gladly.
So then that's when the Land Raider conversation came out, because it was how do you these Centurions are devastating at 24-inch range, but they only move 4 inches a turn. So how do you close the gap really effectively? Because my list originally, and if anyone does follow me on Instagram, you know that I've been paying up Eliminators and other Scouts and Apothecaries. Unfortunately, I have to take all that out of the list after I painted it, because that was part of the original list. But the problem was the Centurions weren't moving quickly enough across the board, so they couldn't actually shoot anything. And Dan, to his credit, came up with the idea of chucking them in the Land Raider Crusader, very specifically because you can drop the Land Raider Crusader on the edge of your deployment zone. You drop it there, and turn 1. I mean, that Land Raider, whether it blows up or not, isn't. I mean, hopefully it doesn't. But whether or not, the main thing is that the Centurions are safe in there. But even more so than being safe in there, on my first turn, they can then disembark 3 inches and then move 4 inches. And due to the size of the Centurion bases, that basically means their first move is about 4 plus about 5, so they get about an 8 to 9 inch move on turn 1. Rather than 4, just by disembarking and then moving out of the Land Raider, which means then their threat range, which was 28, is now 30 plus, which is huge and should hopefully mean that they will be a force to be reckoned with and can get into position to just lay down all that firepower.
I think as well, I mean, when you deal with the fact that you've got the Vulture and the threats that represents, you've got the Gallant and the threats that represents, you've got the Assassins, you've got all the
Land Raider.
Yeah, you've got all the other elements in play. I think, ultimately, early on, assuming that you go first, you could probably find a situation where you've got a Gallant breathing down someone's neck, you've potentially moved the Land Raider without bringing out the Centurions into a more advantageous position for the scary next turn where they just appear. And, I think, again, obviously, those listening to this will be aware of it, but a great deal of people that you'll be playing against will almost certainly not have listened to this, and I think as a result they probably will be surprised, because even knowing what it did, I was still shocked at how efficient that thing is at damaging stuff, and that was with me taking a lot of steps to ensure that I wasn't nearly as at risk as I think some people could be. I think a lot of people look at Centurion squads like that and go, oh, it's really good at killing Orc hordes, I'm not too bothered. But yeah, when you turn around to someone and go, cool, that's 24 mortal wounds to your knight, they're like, oh, hang on a second here, and I've still got 24 saves to take. Ugh. Yeah, this isn't ideal.
Yeah, also good for annoying flyers as well.
Yeah, very good. Well, the +1 to hit is massive. I think at one point we were talking about trying to get a Rhino Primaris in there as well, which is the...
That was the original list I did have the Rhino Primaris as well. So, which you combo that with the Phobos Captain means if you did Bolter Drill on basically you get an extra 50% shots because you get +2 to your hit, so everything on a 4+ is proccing Bolter Drill. But the Rhino Primaris is not, that's like 180 points, is not worth it. And it took a long time to get this list to where it is, because I wanted a Gallant, because if you've never used a Gallant in the game, I highly recommend it, because they're just really good fun. And they're really handy tactically, because people either shoot all their firepower at it and don't kill it, or they do and they still waste all their firepower for a turn. The Vulture's awesome, the Assassin, love the Assassin, and I really wanted to test out these Centurions as well, so really chuffed that somehow managed to make all the points fit. And make it work. So hopefully, I'm going to take it to the Brawl thing, SummerSlam or Summer Brawl or something this weekend.
Yeah, so that's
test it out there.
Yeah, the 40k Brawl event that Adam was talking about earlier as well. So yeah, myself, Rich, and Joe are going to be going along to that. Each of us bringing our GT armies for playtesting purposes. So. Yeah, I guess we'll get to see what the lay of the land is. If we all come first, second, and third, respectively, then we'll know we're in the right place, I suppose. I mean,
if I come last, I'll probably have a different list.
Well, possibly. I mean, Joe, what's your thoughts and feelings on all of this nonsense?
It puts out a devastating amount of shots, that's for sure. And I think it all. Like with most Imperial kind of lists that rely on shooting, I think you're going to have to make sure you go first every game.
One thing I forgot to add, those Centurions are Imperial Fists, so they ignore cover.
Well, all Centurions ignore cover.
Oh yeah, well never mind. Well, whatever. My ones ignore it twice.
Yeah. I mean, you say that though, Joe. I mean, what do you think genuinely kind of can apply a legitimate amount of pressure to that early game?
I think the 7 Eldar flyer list is going to obviously cause a lot of trouble. I'm going to play the pessimist on this one. If that Land Raider goes up turn 1, and you roll a couple of 1s, you're going to be in trouble, because obviously when it explodes, you've got to roll for the people inside.
Yeah, you do. You do. I think in that instance as well, right? That's what the Tech Marine's there for. Oh no, he's dead. But yeah, no, it's a fair point. I think the thing is that when I look at it in the Elder matchup, when we, from my own perspective, I think there's so much terrifying firepower, right? Like, yeah, okay, fair enough. The Elder can probably kill the Land Raider. That's fine, but again, you're utilising a rule set that bottom floors of ruins block line of sight. So all Richie essentially needs to do is park his Land Raider next to a wall, which inevitably will be somewhere near his deployment zone or in it. And then before you know it, it's going to become increasingly more difficult for you to actually shoot that thing. I mean, okay, for Elder Flyers, not so much. But here's the thing, right? Out of that comes some Centurions, and if you've got backline infrastructure units such as your scatter bikes or things of that nature, these guys are just going to absolutely ruin you because they're just going to... Yeah, and then you can't win anyway.
If you come up against a Castellan and go first, that Castellan's going to be left with a bit of a headache.
Yeah.
If not, be dead turn one.
Against a... What's it? Imperial. If it's an Imperial Castellan, which is unlikely, to be fair, because you're going to take it House Raven because that's why you took a Castellan. It's still going to have to use its. It's going to have to use that. He's going to have to remember he's got that 5-up stratagem. The stratagem to get 5 up to ignore more wounds. So it's still going to take a massive beating.
Oh god, yeah.
Even if he does that, it's a Castellan. So assuming I do 20 mortal wounds and he saves, what would that be, like 6 of them? Yeah. So he's still taken 14, and then he's got to take 14 saves on 3-up.
Oh god, yeah.
So then he's going to lose like another. So he's still going to be nearly dead.
Well, no, Rich, he's actually going to have to take 20 saves on his 3-up, isn't he? Because as many, because they're toughness 8.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, and you're majoritively strength 4. Admittedly, obviously, some of your stuff is strength 5, but so actually he's going to have to take an amount of wounds against -1, and then he's, so
it's true.
Yeah, so actually you probably find that I feel like this unit is guaranteed to kill a Castellan, regardless, because you're gonna probably do something in the ballpark of 26, 28 wounds to it, and then fair enough. 20, 22 of them are going to be mortal wounds, but you then still got to resolve all your saves after that, and I just don't. Even with the I ignore mortal wounds thing, it's like cool, but you still then got to pass. You haven't got too many wounds left in the bank after that, do you?
It definitely in like the Orc matchup, you're going to devastate them. But you'll give like the popular tower list at the moment a major headache. Because obviously that thing just works on passing mortal wounds off onto drones, but like
it won't work because it only works on vehicles and Titanic units.
Oh, okay.
That's the only caveat for it. So because like most of the Tau stuff, they're just big
suits,
monsters, right? Or just suits or like monster suits as opposed to vehicles. So it doesn't quite help.
So all of this is just against vehicles, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The mortal wounds is against vehicles. The 5+ to proc bolter drill is against anything.
Oh, that's right. Because there's still that many shots going up against, like, I don't know, a Riptide or a unit of broadsides. That many shots. They're not like. You're going to kill all of the drones that the shots are being passed on over to, and then we'll either just kill the unit of broadsides, or they're going to be left on sod or wounds. So that should be fine.
And if they're still alive, I've still got the Land Raider, plus I've got the Vulture.
Yeah.
And the
that's even before we talk about the troop. And there's the Gallant that's going to be running around causing trouble.
Yeah.
And I've got the 3 scout squads that can either be held back or just claiming the board. There's the Elysians who will be dropping in from turn 2, probably in the same sort of place, but equally. So I've got one guard squad will be like in the back line, probably screening the Phobos captain because he can't get in the Land Raider with the Centurions. That's the only slight concern, is that he has to kind of be out there on his own.
Yeah,
and could possibly get killed. But
that was my question. What's the range on his ability for giving them the +1
he just needs to be able to see it. He has to pick a unit that he can see.
that they can also see?
Well, it
All
doesn't
right.
actually specify that they can see it because technically you could use a unit. You could use an ability that ignores line of sight.
Eliminators.
Yeah, because his specific buff is for any Imperial Fist or any like in like chapter unit as opposed to a Phobos unit. So it was an interesting one because it's a special warlord trait specifically for Phobos, which is that he can do that. But yeah, he can't get in. He can't be in the Land Raider turn 1, so he's kind of in cover or like blocked from line of sight via the Land Raider and other units and like guard or scouts to kind of make sure no one can shoot him.
Yeah, I guess he could always be just hanging out behind the Land Raider, sort of following it. Because what you don't want to do is have him in a position sort of at the back of the board, and then you realise you want to target a unit that he can't see because you positioned poorly.
Yeah, he'll just run across the board is the kind of the main idea. He'll just run around saying, shoot at that thing, shoot at that thing. It's basically Imperial Guard style play for Space Marines.
I really like the list though, man. I think it's I think it's really inventive. I think it's got a lot of really cool stuff in it, and I love all the options in it. I think again and I've been really impressed by the process of the resourceful nature of trying to squeeze everything in. I mean, you've been very kind of clear from the outset the elements that you wanted to have and how, and then it was a process of optimization. And I think you've arrived at that place in a very good way, which is excellent.
Yeah, because there was times we had an apothecary in there to help keep the Centurions alive, but if someone knows to deal with them, they're dead. There's not a problem. That doesn't actually happen.
How many does a Centurion have?
3 wounds.
3 wounds.
Yeah,
3 wounds, 2 up save. One thing I was flirting with, and I haven't been able to get it working. The final list that I've got here is to take a Siegebreaker cohort captain with the special warlord trait for that detachment, which is it's a really cool one, but it's hard to actually make work effectively. Which is that if the captain with the warlord trait doesn't move, then all chapter units within 6 inches get the benefit of cover even if they remain stationary, and they automatically pass morale tests, which would mean that the Centurions would basically have a 1-up save in the open.
That's pretty good.
Which is really cool, but against the combined might of all Dan's flies, it didn't help them.
But I guess that only works if you don't move them. And
Exactly, it's only good for basically 1 turn.
Yeah.
Because after the second turn, so I took it primarily for it meant that in turn 1, if I went second, they'd have the benefit of cover wherever they happen to be. Turn 2, they'd move forward 4 inches. There's definitely still be within 6 of the captain if he stayed still. So that's 2 turns of them having a 1-up save in the open. I say 1-up. Obviously, a 1 is still a fail, but for AP -1 unit weapons, it still means it's 2-up. But the problem is it takes them a long time to get across the board. And once we started looking at using the Land Raider specifically to give them a slingshot move, if you will, in turn 1, it made no sense having the captain with the warlord trait to give them cover in the open, because it's not actually, they might be dead before he can even use it, because they'll be halfway across the board by that point, and that captain can't move. There is technically a way that could have got around it using a Phobos captain to teleport him forward to be with them, but then it gets very expensive points wise to. I was taking things out, and I really wanted the Vulture, really wanted the Gallant, really wanted to try out these Centurions, really wanted the Assassin, and yeah, so we got to there. I forget where the moment of inspiration came from. I think it was one that you were talking down about adding a Tech Marine in at some point, and then I was, oh wait, there is a really cheap one, because I wanted to keep because the other trick was keeping the CP high, because we found ways to make it work by, say, taking the Imperial Fist as a patrol or as a whatever the one is, I forget what it is. The one where you have three heavy support choices.
Spearhead, yeah.
Spearhead, that's it. So we looked at those, but then I lose 4 CP and then I end up with no CP. As it stands in this list, I have got, I want to say 10 CP before I start allocating things like heirlooms to the household and exalted core. Assuming I do that, I have 8 CP.
Oh no, I think you have 10 even with the heirlooms, don't you? Because you've got.
No, because the assassin takes 2.
Oh yes, of course, yeah, because you've got
It
the
actually
two
takes
battalions, and then you've got the
Siegebreaker cohort takes 1.
Yeah, so you've got 13, and then all right.
Yeah, so once you start allocating the thing, because we can, there's a point briefly where we thought about replacing the Gallant with Captain Smash, and the problem is he uses so much CP to make him worthwhile that then I don't have the CP in order to make the Centurions work out. And with the list of the way is now, I'm either 7 or 8 CP, depending basically if I give one of the Astra Militarum HQ choices an heirloom. I've got if I do that, then I've got 7 CP, 8 CP, and with the assassin, that in theory that will be going up once. I'll be gaining 1 CP every couple of turns, ideally. So that's enough CP to play with, because to have a Gallant be fun and do all the funky John Cena smash everything up stuff, you need a small pile of CP. Not as many CP as you need to make a Captain Smash work. You need a small little pile of CP though for your full tilt, or for your rotate ion shields, or your death grip. Most importantly, death grip. Don't leave home without that. And same for those Centurions. They need a CP if they want to do bolter drill. They need a CP if they want to do the mortal wounds to vehicles. So I need to have a little pile of CP there to be able to use, and that's where we ended up. So I'm really excited about it. I'm very happy with where we've ended up. So thank you to all the guys for giving feedback in our little chat groups and that. Especially Dan, you can be very helpful in it. Thank you for loaning me a Land Raider to test out this event.
Yeah, indeed. Well, again, not a Land Raider Crusader though, so it might be worth giving him a call beforehand, because he might be a little bit like, "Ooh," but again, it'll be. I'm sure it'll work out fine. What's the worst that can happen, right? But yeah, no, I genuinely, I think it's solid, and I think you'll take some people by surprise this weekend when you play it, because I don't think anyone will really actually suspect that the Centurions have it in them to butcher big, expensive, vehicle units like the Knights, and I think that's really the trick of it, is that, and I think a lot of people will look at what's there and think, oh, okay, cool, there's all the anti-horde stuff in the Centurions, there's all the bodies, there's the Gallant, and so on, and I think there'll probably be, people tend to become very single-minded when Knights are on the table. When there's one Knight, most people kind of make the assertion based on years or, hundreds of games that Knights are a problem, so they prioritise them. And you'll probably find that actually, in a way, it sounds a mad thing to say that a 360-point unit that is objectively really, really good is a throwaway unit, but in a lot of ways, it's kind of a throwaway unit in your army, right?
I mean, it's the distraction Carnifex is the phrase, right? But a distraction Gallant is what it really is, because everyone I've ever played, they usually go for the Gallant, and even if you fight everything in your army you've got at it. It used to be when you had the good old days of you could rotate iron shields on Iron Bulwark and get a 3+ invuln, that he pretty much always survive turn 1. No matter what they threw at him, he'd be still walking. Now you're going to get to 4++. It's possible to take him down, but it's still not easy. It's going to take you a lot of firepower to try and bring him down, and you usually don't. And to be fair, the game, when we did the test games, obviously you didn't do this, Dan. You decided, I'll just let you. I'm not going to shoot you, Gallant, whatever, because you knew better. And most people don't know better when they see a Knight Gallant running at them. The sensible thing to do is to stop it, because that's what you do. Because you're supposed to stop it. Because if it gets into your ranks, it's going to destroy everything. Especially if. That's when more recently I have not. When I first did it, I took Paladin Gauntlet all the way, and it's great fun if you can just run in and just punch anything to death in a turn. Doing those 8 wounds per punch. But more like lately, I've been more taking the Sainted Iron Armor, which is just a regular 2+, or the 5+ invuln. The 5+ invuln is especially good because you can rotate iron shields on that, and next thing you know, you've got a Gallant which has got a 4+ invuln in combat. Which means that you can then run your Gallant up there, and he can stay in combat with things that any other Knight would be dead to by a long time ago. Like one game I played at the Throne of Skulls, it took 4 rounds of combat. My Knight Gallant against Magnus, 2 Demon Princes, and Ahriman. He didn't kill anything because they had all their demon nonsense and shenanigans. Not to be confused with Eldar nonsense and shenanigans, very different type of nonsense and shenanigans. But they couldn't take him out either because he had a 4+ invuln in combat because I gave him the Sanctuary relic. So I used to be a big fan of giving like the damage dealing items to the Night Gallant, but now I've actually found giving it a little more survivability actually helps it survive longer and be that distraction you need it to be.
That sounds real solid. Any other specific questions from anyone? Phil, thoughts, feelings? What do you reckon of all this, mate?
I like it. It's a really solid list. It seems like it's going to be pretty tough to deal with. Like I said, you've got lots of different things that are going to be an issue to deal with, and you obviously can't deal with all of them on turn 1. So even if the Land Raider gets blown up, you've still got Centurions inside, which will be a bit trickier to shift. So the best you can almost hope for is you're just going to strand them in your deployment zone turn 1 if you don't get to go first and just sort of try and outrange them. But then you've still got the Gallant to deal with, or you've got the Vulture. So, yeah, I think you've got a lot of good ability to do well in the tournament.
Because I'm just thinking, I can use prepared positions on the Land Raider, can't I? Unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, so that can have a 1-up save as well.
I mean, it's 2 CP, so it's expensive, but if that's what's required to weather the storm.
It's an interesting one, though, isn't it? Because I suppose with a lot of your army, the scouts will probably find themselves in some cover. And to be fair, if the scouts are out in no man's land, they don't benefit from prepared positions anyway, because it's only 2 units wholly within your deployment zone. And then the aircraft doesn't benefit from it, the knight doesn't benefit from it. So yeah, you'd have to be really, really concerned about, a turn 1.
Yeah, probably not worth worrying about then. I'll save that TCP.
Sorry, the Centurion's infantry.
Yes.
So because there will be lots of ruins. So in theory, I mean, having Land Raider gives you the extra movement, but you could quite easily have a building on your deployment zone that you can hide in turn 1, and then just sort of pop out in your turn.
The problem with Centurions is they are really big. Like, their bases are massive, so their movement isn't. They can't actually. What they can move 4 inches is not actually that far. Especially when you're moving. If you could put them all in a building for cover and then moved out, you don't actually get to go nearly as far as you would like, and that's one of the things we discovered from the test games against Dan, which is why we then went for using the Land Raider to move them across the board, just by the disembark and then move strategy for it, because they are hard to move around because they only move 4 inches, and their bases are 2.5 or something.
Yeah, I mean, it does mean that you have to place the unit, then move it. It's not one of those situations where you just kind of go, "You okay if I just move it 7 or whatever it is?" You do have to kind of do it specifically, right, I've placed the unit, now I'm going to move it, which is correct and accurate to the rules, so no one could actually or should actually pull you up on that, but at the same time, that's how that works. And but yeah, again, when me and Richie were playing, we were actually using the more modern Sector Imperialis terrain, and had Richie been using a Crusader in that instance, he could have actually parked it on his deployment zone up against the wall of a ruin, which by the rules of the GT I couldn't have seen or shot at. But then obviously because they're infantry, they could just, phase through the wall without any issue and then appear the other side, 9 inches into no man's land, which would have been quite hilarious had that been the case. But fortunately for me at that time, that was not something that Rich had an option for, which is quite nice.
But now I do, thanks to your advice. And then I just need to buy a Land Raider now, and then see what. Because one thing I want to do with this army is my first army. I'm going to paint entirely in contrast, and I wasn't planning on having a Land Raider in it. So I wonder how bad I'm going to make it look if I do it painted with contrast.
I mean, it's yellow as well, right?
I'll find a way to make it work. I've been a big. I mean, I don't. We can talk about contrast paints another time. I'm both a big fan, but I also of the paints, but the limitations, especially in terms of like covering up your mistakes, is a completely different ball game to covering up your mistakes with regular paints.
No, indeed. Sounds like a topic for another time. So, with that all said, I reckon we should move on to whatever it is that comes next. Unless Joe has some insightful closing statements that he'd like to add.
It's actually about contrast paints. I've had a guy in who's actually been painting big things in yellow. So the best thing to do is spray paint the vehicle yellow, then do that like zenithal highlight with the white contrast spray, and then paint on thin layers of contrast, and then it'll go on quite nicely.
Whereas you spray it yellow first, and then do the contrast spray, and then paint on top of that?
Yeah.
Okay, it's an interesting way of doing it.
Well, there you go. You heard it here. Well, clearly not first.
I mean, you definitely heard it here.
You definitely heard it here. And that's got to count for something.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'll no doubt pick your brain on that separately, Joe. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so
Just do what I do, Rich. Just, get Joe to do it. It's easier that way.
Yeah, but I need an army now. I don't need a Harlequin's army in the future.
Wow, it's true, it's true. I reckon Joe will paint you a Land Raider if you ask him kindly enough. And by ask him kindly enough, I mean just give him some money.
I know. What's your rate card like compared to Phil?
Oh, a lot cheaper.
Let's leave it there, gents. Moving on. Woo! Hello, everybody. As those of you who follow our various social media platforms will hopefully already be aware, we've actually gotten into the business of asking you questions, or rather posing things that you can, in theory, answer, and then they themselves turn into questions that we will then answer in return. Does that actually make sense? No, probably not. In essence...
No, it mostly means I'm using the Instagram channel now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, we've
fundamentally it.
instead of just asking questions, we're posting now.
Yeah. That is basically how that goes. So this is the first of the...
Community questions.
There you go. I was leaving a pause because I assumed
Oh.
we were going to...
You just
Name
forgot.
pending.
No. I assumed we were going to film I thought we were going to record a fantastic intro piece, but to be fair, maybe just Phil saying community questions like that will do well enough for now. So Rich, as the custodian of community questions, what was the community question selected by the community for us to feedback on this time around?
We had a bunch of questions about about GT lists that people are working on, but the one that I've already told everyone we're definitely going to answer, so that's one we're going to answer, is what are useless units that you have a soft spot for?
Well, my. Shall we begin with Joe? Joe likes a useless unit here and there.
Yeah, I love my cute units being thrown into my army, which thus makes it terrible. But I absolutely love assault marines, and they've been lost in the wind for many years now. But they're amazing.
Assault marines with jump packs, or assault marines without jump packs, or both?
Definitely with jump packs. If you're going to go for the visual look, I like the one with the single thruster, like the Mark V one that the Blood Angels have. I think they're really, really cool. And like visually, the models are great. And like the aspect, if you think about it, like the aspect of a toughness 4 model that can move 12 inches a turn, has close combat weapons, you'd think like that's pretty good. Turns out it's terrible.
You can also take special weapons in there as well. Don't forget the flamers.
Yeah, and then like other armies that have these kind of assault units, like their ones are amazing. Like Chaos Raptors, they drop down. They take 2 melters and a combi melter. You just take loads of those and they pop tanks. Like Dark Eldar have got Scourges and they drop down and they pop tanks and blow stuff up. Even the Eldar, what are they called?
What? Shining Spears?
Not Shining Spears, the wing dudes, the guys with wings.
What, Swooping Hawks?
Swooping Hawks, even they're useful.
Well, yeah, but you're talking about a series of dudes with guns, not specifically combat weapons.
like everyone else who has a unit like Assault Marines, fast moving, like strike unit, and they're really good. But Assault Marines are crap. They're awful.
Do you think that's exclusively because they have to have combat weapons?
No, I think to make them better, they could do being a little bit cheaper, and they need an extra attack on their profile would go a long way, because they're primarily like they were for a long time the Space Marines' primary assault unit, and but they've only got one attack, so now they've got to change that. That's 2 attacks, which is relatively useless. If you could bump it up to 3, I think that would go a long way. For definite, and I think maybe something like reroll charges. I don't know, or what was the rule when you charged into someone? You got 3 hits.
Hammer of Wrath.
Hammer of Wrath. See, they could bring that back. That would be cool. Like something that does like mortal wounds when they charge.
But that would mean making standard old school Bogo Marines good again, which is seemingly what Games Workshop doesn't want to do ever.
But look, personally, for me, I love them. I like great. Like when you think about like computer games when they're in, like Dawn of War, you have a unit of Assault Marines and they hide behind a wall, and then the orcs come around and you jump over and you slam into them, and orcs go flying everywhere, and they all get chopped up, and it's amazing. But that's not represented in the game. But I kind of want them to be represented in the game, because like armies like Blood Angels, they've got Death Company, but back in the day, the Assault Marines were their troops. And you think like Raven Guard, like their whole shtick is Assault Marines. And they don't even get to use them. They're just like stealthy experts now. But that's it.
Do you remember the weird extra special weapon that they added to the Assault Marine box when they redid it a few years ago? Could you name that chainsword they've got?
Oh, is it the Eviscerator, whatever it's called?
I don't think it's called the Eviscerator, no. I think it's called something like the Executioner.
Oh, I thought it was the Eviscerator as well.
Oh, it could be the Eviscerator then. I can be wrong here.
It was something like that. It began with
it's definitely when it's like Sisters of Battle one as an Eviscerator.
Yeah. And it had like a power fist stats, and that was really cool.
Does it have power fist stats anymore though?
I don't know.
You wouldn't know because no one takes them, right?
Yeah, no, I haven't even looked at them. I haven't even looked at that page. I look at the models. I think, oh, they're awesome. Like, I'd love to have like a proper Raven Guard army, because the Forge World Raven Guard stuff is amazing. And you look at Heresy, and those armies are beautiful. And part of me is like, oh, I'd love a Raven Guard Heresy army. And then I remember no one plays Heresy around here, so that'd be completely pointless.
Well, there you go.
So there you go. That is my example of a terrible unit
that you love.
Now,
but also,
I just looked it up, and it is called the Eviscerator, and it is actually slightly better than a Power Fist.
Oh, is it? What's the stats on that bad boy?
It's minus 4 AP. It's the same as the Power Fist, but it is minus 4 AP, so slightly better.
Crikey. Well, there you go. But the guy wielding it has 1 attack, right? Unless you make it the Sergeant, I suppose.
Yeah.
Is it -1 to hit like a Power Fist?
Yep.
Oh.
Anyway, there you go.
Maybe Primaris will get something like that. That would be nice.
Would it be the same though, Joe?
I don't know. Could I put a beaky head on it?
I mean, you can always put a beaky head on everything, right? That is always a possibility.
All right, then. If they do something like that, then I'll jump on that bandwagon. Until then, I will just sit sullenly in my room, crying at my shrine of Assault Marines.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
So, Rich, what's your favourite rubbish unit in the game?
I think it has to be. I mean, it has to be from Forge World, because they are always slightly gimped, and it's not going to be something with Hellstrike missiles, which are massively overpriced. It's going to be a model that I love, but it's absolutely pointless, which is the Las Cutter. So the Elysians get a Las Cutter, which is basically a las cannon you can use in close combat, but it's costs more points than a melter gun, so it's absolutely pointless.
It costs more points than a melter gun. You can only use it as a melee weapon.
You can use it as a melee weapon, and there was a time when we were trying to find a way to make it cool, if you remember, and of like, could you buff them with a priest or something? But it specifically says in the rules you can only ever make one attack with it, so it's completely pointless, which is a shame because it's such a cool looking model.
Can you fix bayonets with it in your corresponding shooting phase?
It's a good question. I don't know.
No, I wouldn't have thought so, because that is only for las guns and hotshot las guns.
Oh, I thought. Well, I meant to say, because there's a officer command thing, order. That was the word I couldn't find.
The one where you attack. Sorry, not the one where you turn into pistols, but in theory, yeah, because that is a close combat weapon.
So there you go. You can double tap it with orders, Rich. That might be all right.
Well, this has changed everything. I'll have to change my list now.
You've got to change your decision, right? It's like, oh, actually, ooh. But then in that instance, that means that you've got to have craftily hidden it. Jesus, been a long day, everybody. You need to have craftily hidden it in a unit, been charged with something.
We got to calm down and relax because Elysians don't have that order.
All right, well, there you go. Rubbish. Rubbish.
There we go. Easy, calm down, everyone. The Elysian Lascutter is still useless.
There you go. What a happy
I'm glad I spent a lot of money to get those models off eBay.
Was it the Lascutter only introduced to deal with doors in not Zone Mortalis, but the Amphibian base, which was released at the same time, all those many moons ago?
I think it's very likely. It could have been. The Elysians were very heavily tied into that campaign, so.
Actually, a copy of that book at work today, and I wasted a vast amount of time reading it instead of doing my job. It's a good thing my boss doesn't listen to this podcast.
As far as you're aware. What is it specifically then, Rich, about this weapon that has made it? Because, I mean, obviously this is a weapon as opposed to a unit. I don't know whether or not you
that's true.
missed the point of the question that you yourself raised.
I might. Okay, in that case, I probably have completely missed the point of the question. In that case, I'm going to say, come back to me then.
Yeah, okay, fine.
No, in that case, no, I won't. I'll just go back to originally what I would have said then, which is that either the Marauder Bomber or the Marauder Destroyer, because thanks to the aircraft rules, you now basically can't play with them.
Yeah,
the new aircraft rules means you can't put them on the board very easily, and there's some deployment type zones where you literally can't even deploy them in the game because of the new aircraft rules. The whole vehicle wingspan has to be within deployment zones and not overlapping the table edge at any point. And because those models are so huge and amazing and awe-inspiring, they are actually completely unplayable now in most circumstances.
I've actually given this some thought, right? What if you buy another one, right, and get Phil to build it, but build it in the shape of the Star Wars B-Wing, the giant cross? So instead of it lying flat, it's basically standing up on the tip of its wing.
I think you massively overestimate how much money I have to spend on Warhammer models.
So could Phil just take the one that you have and just remodel it so it looks like it's banking really hard between two buildings?
Well, that's true. You could just turn it so it's on its side.
Yeah.
I mean, it's modelling for advantage, but I'm sure you'll be fine.
Yeah, the advantage is being able to actually use it.
That's the thing. I don't think anyone would really begrudge you and say, "Oh, actually, you can't fit it on the deployments, therefore you automatically lose the model."
You say that though. People are getting very tetchy about that stuff with your vulture when you sneak behind enemy lines to snipe their characters. So
that's a valid thing because that's like a small model, and if you can't fit it in the required space, then that's sort of poor placement.
You say the Vulture's a small model, though. It's got that ridiculously long tail to it, though, doesn't it? I mean, it's got such a lot. It's got those two kind of like fins that then go out into the propellery wing back rear bits.
But no bigger than a Vendetta or a Vulture. Sorry, Vendetta or a Valkyrie. The bit
it's the downside of the Imperial or Astra Militarum flyers, though, because they're very kind of like evenly
they're
spread
all
out.
to scale.
Yeah, whereas like if you take an Elder flyer, it's like, oh yeah, well, it just sort of ends at a point. It's all, it's much easier. Again, it's one of those things that they sort of like put in a rule that somewhat is intended to potentially assist with the Elder flyer problem, and then discover that actually they've just yet again done something inadvertently that mucks around everything else but the thing they intended to try and fix.
Yeah, because the Elder have that, I don't know what it's called now, but it used to be like Vector Dancer that you can move after you can pivot after you move.
I think it's all wrapped up in a rule called Wings of Cain now.
Yeah, because Imperial flyers don't get that anymore, or have never had it. But it makes it very difficult for now with the new flyer rule, or the aircraft rule. It makes it very hard to move and then rotate, so you're still technically on the board, which isn't a problem the Eldar flyers have.
Well, there was that really weird period in time, wasn't there, where they added the Scour the Skies expansion to 7th edition, and only a few people actually cared or got involved in it. And then you'd always turn up to an event or tournament or whatever it was, and someone goes, "I'm using the Scour the Skies rules," and you're like, "Oh God, I've never even read that thing. What's that doing? You've got this many maneuver points," and it's like, "Oh Jesus!" So that was always.
I remember doing that it was a Warhammer World event. I don't think it was pre-GT, but I played an Orc player. Basically, we did this pre-flight, pre-game phase. I put my Avenger down. He put down his 2 Orc flyers. I literally lost every roll that I could have conceivably rolled, and then he destroyed my flyer. So before the game even started, that was like one unit that's like 200 points off the table, and I was like, "Oh, that was fun!" Great.
Could he? But at the time, given the fact that you probably hardly ever used that rule set, he could have told you anything. He goes, "Oh, have you read this book?" "No." "Oh, all right. Well, look, roll some dice." "Ah, it's blown up." That's it.
Well, yeah, and I was basically like, I don't really want to do it, and he was like, "Oh, well, I do," and because I think the rules of the tournament was like, if someone wants to do it, you have to do it. So I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll just do these rolls and sort of follow what you're doing," and I'll sort of look at the thing, and I was like, whatever.
That's such a ridiculous stipulation for a tournament. Just because one person wants to do it, we're doing it. I.e., I want to win, so you have to lose. Oh, okay, cool. Is that? I mean, I suppose he does really want it, so well, that's that done. There we go. Well, good selection there, Rich. Phil, what do you think is a poo-poo unit that you love dearly?
Well, I'm going to. This is something we discussed many moons ago in one of our early podcasts, and it's the Medusa siege tank or cannon, depending on which variety it is. Predominantly the Armageddon pattern, because that's the one I've got, and it was a staple in my army back in 7th edition and was always pretty good. And then come around to 8th edition, where it's basically worse than a Basilisk, and there's literally no reason why you'd ever take one. So basically, with the exception of the first few games that I ever played of 8th edition, I've never really fielded them again, even though I've got 2 of them, and they're both sort of lovely models. But yeah, it used to have a breacher shell rule, which made it really good at attacking vehicles. The Armageddon pattern of it can't take those shells, and the versions that do have that shell, it only affects buildings. And as we all know, no one really takes buildings in 8th edition. And then they basically then buffed after the index. They buffed the Basilisk cannon to have the equivalent AP value. So there's only one strength difference between them. So there's no real benefit to the Medusa over the Basilisk.
Yeah, it does always seem like a little bit of a misstep on that one. But again, it's sort of a weird thing, isn't it? Because like you said, it did used to be quite a cool, awesome unit in older editions. I just think, again, it's one of those weird things where the guys at Forge World or Games Workshop don't really entirely interpret what it was or what actually can make these things interesting. And as a result, it just sort of falls down into this weird kind of void of prescribed uniformity or something where they just start going, well, we don't really want to make it too much better than a Basilisk, so we're just going to sort of come up with something a little different, but ultimately charge you through the nose for it, and that'll do. I don't know. I mean, do you feel like that's the sort of vibe of what sort of occurred with this one, or do you think it's just literally that? Yeah, it's just nothing.
Well, I think it's just a problem with all the Forge World stuff is they're sort of still stuck in the index limbo where there was obviously some things wrong with them. They never really bothered, or I guess wanted to fix them in an update, such as chapter approved for whatever reason, and they've just not ever been fixed because they've never released a book. Hopefully that will change down the line because obviously the core Games Workshop 40k team are taking it over. So maybe we'll see some updates to these units down the line. But we're into like the third year of 8th edition now, or third.
It is pretty much the third year of it, yeah.
So they're taking their time about it, basically. So it would be good to see these units, or there's a whole bunch of units, as Richie said, Forge World units need a lot of love, and hopefully they'll get them at some point. But that's why there's a lot of units which, like the Medusa, for example, where it's a really cool unit, looks great, should do something, but just doesn't quite do it, and unfortunately there's an almost identical or comparable unit which does the same thing but better. So why would you ever take it?
Yeah. Do you imagine though at some point they'll just release some beta rules similar to how they did with Custodes, where you'll find yourself in a situation where all of a sudden these things are the best tanks in the world bar none?
Oh, do you know what? I don't think they would. I would think they would all get a buff, but I imagine they just come out in a book. If it's now game like the core 40k rules writing team doing it, the beta rules was done when I think, and I could be wrong, when it was Forge World was still running it, and they were the ones that seemed to do a lot of the beta rules, even though obviously the main team does. But I wouldn't have thought they'd necessarily do it for an army. But who knows? I mean, they could do something like, a White Dwarf article, for example, where they just make a few units better. But I think more likely we'll see a specific book with them all in.
That makes a lot of sense. Cool. Well, I guess from my side of things, the unit I absolutely love, but is utterly useless at this moment in time, and this was the unit, the model, the thing that kind of actually originally sparked my interest in Warhammer 40,000. I remember friends of mine going through an issue of White Dwarf or something of that ilk. Maybe it was the Warhammer 40,000 rulebook, in fact, but regardless, I remember friends of mine having a book of some description, and me kind of flicking through the pages, looking at the models, and I saw one of these models and decided that this was the army for me, and this is something that I really, really needed to get involved in. And that is, of course, the humble Striking Scorpion. So, Striking Scorpions are by far and away my favourite looking, favourite kind of unit in 40k, in terms of what they represent from their lore and looks perspective. I also love the fact that the Scorpions have got the really kind of weird sort of checkered past with the Phoenix Lord conundrum that occurred. So Kandras, the Shadowhunter Phoenix Lord of the Striking Scorpions, is not actually the first Phoenix Lord of the Striking Scorpions. I won't go into all the details of lore and whether or not he's actually Mr. Shadowblade fella from Drakari. What's his name again? Drazar?
Yeah.
Drazar, yeah. I don't necessarily subscribe to that belief so much so, but at the same time, possibly will be. Who could say? But Striking Scorpions are just awesome. But in game terms, again, fundamental issue with this unit. First and foremost, they're an assault unit that specialise exclusively in combat. Second of all, they're actually quite expensive. They've got a number of very interesting war gear options that, on the face of things, feel like they should be quite incredible, but actually don't really boost you in areas where you would want to be boosted. So they are armed with the Scorpion chain swords, And the Scorpion Chainswords don't add additional attacks, but in fact just add 1 to your strength, making you a mighty strength 4, which in certain contexts is probably quite impressive, but in the case of, Warhammer 40,000 8th edition isn't anything that impressive, to be completely honest with you. And then in terms of all their special rules and abilities, yes, they can deep strike, yes, they've got battle focus, yes, they've got ancient doom, as is the sort of standard array of elder abilities, but yeah, they can come out from deep strike as any other kind of deep striking unit. They add 1 to their hit rolls when they're attacking units that are within cover. And again, it's not entirely clarified whether or not those attacks are, or rather you're adding 1 to hit for shooting and close combat attacks. I think it's actually just a generic add 1 to hit when rolling for attacks against a unit that is in cover. But again, I don't know what I'm necessarily going into that so much for. And then the signature piece of war gear for the Striking Scorpions is the Manda Blaster, which is essentially these 2 kind of face-mounted, mandible things that kind of come off the sides of their helms. And these now inflict mortal wounds against infantry for a roll of a 6, unmodified 6 on a d6, and you roll 1d6 per member of the unit. So all of this sort of seems relatively reasonable from the outset, but when you combine the situation with the amount of points it costs to take them, and just how rubbish combat is, unfortunately, there is very little room in the world of Warhammer 40,000 8th edition for the humble Striking Scorpion, which is a shame, because as Joe said with the Assault Marines, it is probably one of the more iconic units within Elder, and definitely very, very impressive. I mean, Joe, what's your opinion on the Striking Scorpions? Why do you reckon we don't see too many of them?
I don't know, because first and foremost, I love them. I love the fact that they're entirely ripped off and based on the Predator. Because I love the dreadlock, and the whole thing about them being the stealthy killers is great. And you think that, like, can they infiltrate still?
Yeah, so, well, they don't infiltrate, they deep strike.
They deep strike, yeah.
So yeah, they go in reserves and they arrive 9 away from an enemy.
Yeah, so it's one of those things, like, on paper, like, they should be amazing. They're a unit that drops in when they charge, they're strength 4, they do mortal wounds. They don't have many attacks, but you'd think that that's actually a really versatile unit, useful unit. But when there's so many points, there's other units in your army that do the job better. Like, you can do the same. You can just drop in a massive blob of guardians for less points, and they'll just shoot like 1,000,000 shots. And then they get like a 3-up save when someone shoots at them.
I think, and again, without wanting to labour the point, because we've made it many, many times on this podcast, but I think the fundamental issue with Striking Scorpions is linked to the fundamental issue with elite units in general within this game. The game is much more in favour of mass bodies, so the maximum amount of people in return for the lowest possible investment is actually a better metric to measure success in 40k 8th edition than having good stats, because the game has just become about weight of numbers. Essentially, when you create a game's rule set and system where you overly increase the damaging effect of weapons to the extent that they have. I mean, again, if you only went back 1 edition, an assault cannon, a twin-linked assault cannon had 4 shots re-rolling to hit, whereas in the modern era, a twin-linked assault cannon has 12 shots, which is quite a dramatic increase, as I'm sure anyone can immediately notice. And obviously, again, it's it's a very different rule set in some regards, but that the impact of those changes to the shooting weapons in the game has had an effect on the viability of certain things, and I think elite units have hugely suffered. And it's a shame, because ultimately the game has now just literally become Horde Hammer. It's either you've got big stompy things that can smash their way through stuff, incredibly nimble fly things that can't get hit, or you're just a complete mass of bodies, and that seems to really kind of be the competitive edge of the game. But Yeah, back in the day, I always sort of felt like there still was a place for things like striking scorpions because they had high initiative, they had loads of attacks, they had, you know, lots of options, but not so much these days. It's just a real shame. And I think it's reflected in a lot of the game of 40k that you see. I think there's a lot of really cool units that you just don't see anymore because they're just a bit rubbish, which I guess is the inspiration for this bit that we're talking about now. So there you go.
I think unfortunately for Eldar, Banshees can probably be lumped into the same category as them, as the striking scorpions.
Every single, with the exception of Dark Reapers, Shining Spears, and maybe Swooping Hawks, all of the Aspect Warriors are just not worth it, which is a real shame because actually these are some of the more iconic units that the Elder Army has. But
Is it that they're not useless? And in fact, if you were to compare them to sort of like-for-like units in other armies, they're still probably quite good. But it's just the rest of the Elder Army are just so much better or more points efficient.
I mean, obviously, yes, the rest of the Elder Army is so much better and points efficient. But I think as well it is just because the game doesn't support these types of units anymore. They're just useless because they don't move. They don't move fast enough. They don't do enough. There's not enough damage output from them, and they can't perform any sort of, you know, general kind of functions. They don't have objective secure. They don't have, you know, it's like what do you get? What does a unit of striking scorpions do that nothing else can do? And the answer is nothing. It's literally a unit of Storm Guardians is better than them in terms of the game, not in terms of stats and not in terms of survivability and all the other rule-based things, but in terms of the game, yeah, it's a real shame because I love them. I think they're a really, really great unit, and I always used to play them. Joe, you can attest to this.
Yeah, when 8th edition came out, you were actually running Kandras and like 2 or 3 big squads of them.
Yeah, well, again, in 7th, I was used to have them kicking around. Like, I'd always just put them in now and again because I love them. I would be like, I'll just run Striking Scorpions in this game because I really, really liked using them. Same thing for Fire Dragons, same thing for, well, I mean, everyone was using Warp Spiders by the end of 7th edition because they were a bit bonkers. But, yeah, like, Strike, again, I said it before, Eldred Ulfran is kind of like my spirit animal in the game of 40k because I've always had Eldred Ulfran in armies, but also Striking Scorpions are kind of there as well. The two are kind of the same. I would, if Striking Scorpions were even just the little bit good, like even if they were remotely usable, I'd probably try and find an excuse to include them. In fact, I have tried to find excuses to include them, but every time I run the numbers or look at them, I just go, they just don't work. There's nothing these guys do in the game that's useful. Like, literally, they can't even really run into hordes like they used to. Because back in the day, the thing that Striking Scorpions used to be amazing at, where they were your anti-horde unit, you chuck them into a 30-man blob of orcs, you kill about, you know, with combat as it was back then, maybe you killed like 7, 8, 9. Because you were much more survivable, you would then, you know, survive the returning attacks because you charged them, because you took the initiative. They were only strength 3 at that point because they used to have furious charge, so they became strength 4 on a charge, and they wouldn't really hurt you very much coming back at you because you have a 3-up armor save, and then you'd make them flee and cut them all down because, you know, that's kind of the thing these guys did. But again, in 8th edition, they're rubbish because you throw them at an orc unit and you take, say, I don't know, 10 of them, you throw them at an orc unit and you go, oh, I've got 20 attacks and I'm wounding you on 4s and hitting you on 3s, and okay, yeah, sure, maybe 2 mortal wounds will occur. But at the end of it, you'll go, cool, I've killed, let's moderately say 8 to 10. I killed 10 orcs. But then the returning orcs just go, cool, but now you're all dead. And it's like, oh, okay, fine. Which is a complete change of pace. Anyway, there you go. I've talked enough about it. Striking Scorpions is my choice. I love them. I wish they were better, but they're not. Sad times.
So it's not the combat phase as a whole, it's specifically the Striking Scorpions.
Combination of elements, my friend. The combat phase, as I've said many, many times, is utterly useless because it practically doesn't exist, does it? I mean, how often do you see combat happen in games of 8th edition 40k that isn't being, done by Captain Smash or a Gallant. It just doesn't happen.
I'm glad you added the caveat.
Yeah, of course, there's caveats. There are things that over-index in this current combat system, but they're all high damage, high attacks, CP, hungry units that, I was saying to Rich the other day, when we and Phil were running Captain Smash at that doubles tournament, he was costing us between 6 and 7 CPs in turn 1. So you'd expect some return for that investment.
Actually, I also want. I've got another unit I want to throw in because I want to end on a nice positive note that isn't just you complaining about combat, which is.
Yes, that's fair enough. Sorry, I keep coming back to that same problem, don't I? I just want my Scorpions to be better, Rich. Is that so hard to ask for?
I want to throw in the Grot tanks because I think they are really, really cool and you never see them.
Do you know why that is? Because you have to take a...
Because they cost about £100 each or something.
Well, yeah, but Phil's got an army of them, haven't you, Phil?
I do. I bought a whole bunch of them because I was going to do it as a sort of... It was before the GTs, but it was my attempt at going to do a best army, best faction. I was like, I'll do a load of Grot tanks. But then actually the 8th edition rules changed them slightly, so you can't just take Grot tanks. You have to take them with... It's like a big mech type guy, I think. I can't remember his name. So, you have to take them with a particular type of unit, which sort of invalidates the whole idea of doing a Grot tank army.
So that was us talking about units that we like, but will probably very rarely, if not ever, use because rules and stuff. Which is a bit rubbish, unfortunately. There you go. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you would like to get involved in more of these community conversations or polls, as they were, that was the word I couldn't find earlier. It's been, again, I'll say it before and I'll say it again. It's been a long old day. But yeah, if you'd like to get involved in all of this, simply look for Lookout Sir on either Facebook or more specifically Instagram, because that seems to be pretty much now where we're going to pretty much be the most active. Wouldn't you say so, Rich?
It's definitely where I prefer to hang out and interact with people. Because it's so much more simpler and it's cleaner, so that's kind of where we're going to focus on, because we're all busy people.
We are.
So if you do want to interact with us, check us out on Instagram. That's where we'll be trying to do more content and more interaction as often as we can, which won't be all the time, but we're going to do our best.
Exactly. And so if you'd like to take part in future polls and let us know what you want us to be talking about in the future, I suppose Instagram is the place to do it. Transitional noise. Woo! And that concludes episode 26 of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. A pretty interesting podcast overall, I would say. I think we covered off some pretty good bits and pieces here and there. I especially like the bit where Joe talked about the things he's done. That was always nice, wasn't it, Joe?
Yeah, there was. And being forced to do goat noises again.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that was pretty amazing. Although we don't entirely know at this point whether that will have made it into the final edit. I think there was a bit of controversy around that.
Yeah, it's my inability to recreate that noise on cue. I feel like I need some time, go to like a room, gather myself, inhabit the spirit of a goat. It's a drawn out process.
Well, absolutely. I think, we can all of us together, understand and believe that was a very special moment in time where we were able to collectively witness or hear a very special sound effect that will live on in our hearts forever. So, let's not try and, sour the moment by trying to replicate it. Let's just, savor and enjoy what you achieved on that day.
Yeah, it will forever live on in a soundbite stolen by you.
It was a great achievement. I also quite liked Rich's roundup of his army. That was quite cool and exciting, Rich. Hopefully you do really well at this weekend's 40k Brawl tournament, and then subsequently at the Grand Tournament, mate. What's your prediction for Grand Tournament? Where do you think you're going to come?
To be honest, I'm hoping I just scrape through into early 30s, so I qualify for the final.
It's top 30 get through, right?
Yeah, that's what I'd like to, because I've been consistently getting slowly up the rank, up the leaderboards. I'm usually about solid like mid-table and just shy of getting in the top third, and I'd really like to get into the top third this time. So hopefully, I'll get there this time. That's what I'm really hoping for. Mostly hoping to have some good games as well, and not get drawn against you or Joe because I'm scared of both your armies. But no, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really confident with what I've got. Hopefully, I've not practiced too much with it, so I'm hoping to do quite well this time. That's what I'd like to do. I'd really like to just qualify this time. That'd be awesome.
I mean, what do you think about that, Phil? That he didn't specifically name check you as a concern.
Well, it could just be because he doesn't know what my list is going to be.
Well, that is possible.
Is it definitely?
I doubt it though.
Do you know what your list is going to be?
No, because it's all down to how much I can get painted in next week, basically.
Oh.
You should have taken the worms, my man. The worms you could have painted quickly.
I mean, if you're still doing your Inquisition stuff, I'm pretty sure that's not competitive. So I think I'll be alright.
I was predominantly taking those to go for best army or for some of the painting competitions, because it's not about winning the main competition for me, it's about all the other bits.
The rule of cool is all that Phil needs.
I'm prepared to bet £5 that he takes a Smash Captain this time. Because I think he really enjoyed it when he teamed up with you at Throne of Skulls.
I think he did. I think he enjoyed the power. He's just trying really hard not to succumb to it, you know. He's in that weird kind of process where he experienced it for the first time and he knows he sort of liked it, but he realises that he shouldn't have liked it as much as he did. So he's trying to, rein it in. Isn't that right, Phil?
All true.
Or he's secretly built that Knight Valiant and not told us.
Well, exactly. In Phil's garage, it's just full of Smash Captains that he's been painting frantically over the course of the last few months, and he's then just sort of discarded them. It's like, no, I won't do it. I will be strong. Well, there we go. Anyway, so thanks, Phil, for the input. So yeah, that was episode 26 of the Lookouts 40K podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed, because otherwise that would bring a tear to all of our collective eyes. But nonetheless, yeah, that has been the episode. Thank you very much for checking us out. If you'd like to like and subscribe, then you're welcome to do so. If you don't want to do that, then that's equally cool. There's a whole review thing on the various, podcast platforms as well. I understand 5 stars is a good thing, but again, if you don't think that's what we deserve, then maybe go for 4 or 3. Don't do 2 or lower though, eh? I mean, come on now, be nice. But bar that, I reckon that's everything we needed to say or do in the course of this show. So with that said, it's time to say goodbye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.